Hey, everybody, welcome to another episode of Purple Insider. Matthew Coller here. Great to be with you on this evening. And guess what, everybody? The Minnesota Vikings are 3-0. So, in the quest for the perfect stream, please let me know how everything is looking, how everything is sounding, because I've been working through trying to get the best possible look we can and make it some more efforts. And you know what I have done in my effort is be able to get the live chat on screen. So look at this, everybody. There you go. Got those comments back on the screen. We figured that out. So that means ask a lot of questions. We'll have some fun here for about the next half hour. And then Manny Hill will come on. Of course, you can continue to chat with us. Oh, there was no, the audio wasn't playing for the music. Okay, well, we'll work on that. We will work our way through that. But at least you saw the intro nonetheless in the countdown. And good to hear that it's sounding nice and clear. We got the microphone set up back. I know that I got to make sure I'm not blocking the Vikings logo there behind me. So now we're good to go. So, okay. Well, if the music didn't come through, that's not the worst thing to ever happen, but we'll work on that. I think I know the solution to that. But as long as you can hear me, see me, it sounds good. It sounds crisp. Manny will be in here. And you know what we're going to do very soon is Manny is going to pick the rest of the Vikings schedule. And if you thought that he was pumped for last week when the Vikings won and went to 2-0 and Manny picked 11-6, I cannot imagine what Manny is going to go for this week. But you know what? It becomes less and less ridiculous to pick this team to be very good as we go forward now because they are sitting at 3-0. And I mentioned it yesterday, but I'll keep saying it, that if this team goes 500 the rest of the way, then they are going to be a 10-7 team, which usually is good enough to get into the playoffs and could be good enough to compete with the division because these teams are going to beat up on each other throughout the next several months of our lives. So there's two things to really talk about today. And number one, I want to know how you're feeling. I want to know your feelings. We share here on the show pretty regularly. How are you feeling with 3-0? Are you sitting here thinking, there's something evil around the corner, as there so often is in Vikings history? Are you thinking championship, baby? Are you thinking that you are cautiously optimistic about the team, or maybe cautiously pessimistic, like I'm going to need to see a heck of a lot more? So jump in the comments. Let me know what you think. I am very interested about your viewpoint on this because I'm trying to formulate my own viewpoint on this. What I've mostly been going with, it has been, hey, let's just kind of see what happens, because I don't really know what to expect from here when something like this, when a team comes out of nowhere ish. I mean, not nowhere necessarily if you were paying really close attention to this team throughout training camp and everything else, but nowhere in the way that we didn't expect them to be 3-0. There's only a handful of teams in the entire NFL who are 3-0. So, of course, if you had said, oh, yeah, guaranteed 3-0. All right. Well, then you would have show me the betting receipt then of you betting for them being 3-0. Cause I don't even think the biggest Vikings honk would have said 3-0. Probably 2-1 would have been the best case scenario in this situation. And they are better than that at this spot. So are you feeling like they are going to be one of those teams in Vikings history that surprises us, but becomes an unbelievably memorable season? Is this a hot stretch? And when we have examples of this all through Vikings history, you can reach back into history and find every single one of these scenarios that have happened. You can find 1998, where they were a complete shock to be 15-1, or you can have 2016 where they went 5-0 and then they ended up falling off in the second half of the season, finishing 3-8 the rest of the way, had a bunch of pretty tough losses and close losses, and they end up missing the playoffs. Injuries got them big time that year. And so it just sort of underscores how long the season is, that both of those things are still very much on the table. Is it a 2016? Is it a 2017 for the younger viewer who maybe saw the Minneapolis Miracle and the way that season played out? But in 2017, we really didn't think that they were going to be any good until, I don't know, maybe like Thanksgiving when they beat the Detroit Lions on Thanksgiving in 2017. That's when we started to really talk about them. And I also think there was a win in there against the Los Angeles Rams that was really impressive in the 2017 season. That was the prove it. Okay, they had beaten some teams, but go prove it. And then they went to Atlanta and shut down Matt Ryan and won that game as well. Okay, this team could go deep in the playoffs. The way that they were playing against some good quarterbacks or good offenses when they faced them. But we've gotten those tests so much earlier now with the first couple weeks of the season and two of the better quarterbacks and the better offenses in the NFL. And I don't think that there is any downplaying how good the 49ers and Texans are. They may not be quite as good as last year for the 49ers as you saw them blow that game against the Los Angeles Rams, but that doesn't change my opinion on how good of a win that was and how talented and deep San Francisco really is. Their backup running back is tremendous. And they had they had their tight end, they had their wide receiver, where they did not have those things yesterday with Deebo Samuel and George Kittle. And then when you talk about the Houston Texans, those wide receivers are incredible. Nico Collins had something like 250 yards already coming into the game and then was completely shut down. They kept Stephon Diggs in front of them. Tank Dell did absolutely nothing. And some of it was self-inflicted by the Houston Texans, but I refuse to believe that it was just all self-inflicted because the Vikings have done plenty of inflicting. And I think that that's when I look through the roster and I look through how they've won these games, and I don't see luck elements. I don't see, okay, well, they're 3-0, but they played nobody. They're 3-0, but they got lucky. They're 3. Okay, so let's talk about what could keep going and what could not keep going. They're not going to get 5 sacks a game. If you got 5 sacks a game, that would be like having Lawrence Taylor and Reggie White on your team. That's about how you would end up, or John Randall and Everson Griffin in his prime or something like that. They have a very good defense, but I don't know that they have Bruce Smith and Reggie White on the same defense. So 5 sacks a game is maybe a little much. That will come down at some point. But would you be surprised if they lead the NFL in sacks with the way that they play? I would not. So I think the pressure on opposing quarterbacks is going to continue. I think the confusion with the defense is going to continue, and it can be much more shape shifting than last year because they have the personnel to do it. Where you could say that opponents figured them out at the end of last year. Was it really figuring them out, or was it the fact that they lost players that were starters and they had nobody else to come in for them? They have to stay relatively healthy. They need Stephon Gilmore. Absolutely need Stephon Gilmore. They need Shaq Griffin to stay healthy. They need Byron Murphy to stay healthy, and all the safeties. You can have Theo Jackson come in for a couple of weeks, I'm sure, but they need that group to stay healthy. It was impressive that they were able to replace Ivan Pace Jr. with Kamu Grugier-Hill, who's a veteran. They could replace some people on the D-line. They could replace Dallas Turner, but not really the secondary. Those are the guys that they need big time to stay healthy. So being that it's a long season, that is really important. Still, I don't see a major regression point when you've already played great quarterbacks and great offensive minds in Kyle Shanahan and in Bobby Slowick, who have had so much success. It's not like it gets harder than that. It may be on the same level, but it doesn't get harder. They will have more road games. They do have a game in London, but they get the bye week after that. They have not played any division games yet, so we can't really judge them on the division games. And then the other side of the ball, what it really comes down to is Sam Darnold. And I expect some regression for Sam Darnold because he's not going to finish the season with 117 quarterback rating. And let's see, he's got 8 touchdowns through 3 weeks. Somebody do the math. But is that like a 40 touchdown season for Sam Darnold? I'm not sure it's going to be quite on that level. But at the same time, as we talk about Darnold and potential regression, they will face some nasty defenses. The Jets are a very good defense. I would say the Packers are much, much improved on defense, though they haven't really been tested the last couple weeks. And then, when it goes to, the after the break, you're talking about Detroit and Los Angeles. These are not easy teams for a quarterback to go up against with Aiden Hutchinson on that Detroit team. They're playing much better defense than they did last season so far. So there's going to be a lot of tests going forward for Sam Darnold. But the convincing point to me about him continuing to do this, other than his confidence, other than just working with Kevin O'Connell and what that looks like, is really the fact that TJ Hawkinson and Jordan Addison will come back. And you've already proven that Jalen Naylor can do this. You've already proven that Aaron Jones is a major impact player out of the backfield. And that is so impressive yesterday with his receiving out of the backfield, outside of when he's setting an illegal pick, which probably was an illegal pick that he negated a touchdown for. But that element, the screens have been working, the running game has been working, and the left guard has been working. The right guard, once again, not so much yesterday, but 4 out of 5 of the offense has been coming in pretty well so far. And that is something that I just can't see getting much worse outside of injury. That's really the only thing, and we just never know when that's going to happen, that could really take them down. And on the injury front, Sam Darnold has a bruised knee that the team announced to us today, and does not have anything that has happened to other quarterbacks' knees recently. Does not have meniscus or anything else, but just a bruise in his knee. So he is going to be available. It doesn't sound like he's going to miss any real practice reps this week. We'll see on the practice report come Wednesday. But it appears that Sam Darnold is 100% to go to Lambeau and play there as the Vikings quarterback. The fact that he came back in the game, he was looking as spry as he was still after bruising his knee, and then he comes back the next day and there's no real problems. That was enormous, obviously, for them, because if you do lose Darnold, then you're talking about going to Nick Mullins to try to save your season. But the fact that he is healthy means that whatever celebrating you were doing after 3-0, and then you heard the words MRI or letters MRI, you probably got pretty nervous, because after JJ McCarthy played so well and then had an MRI, it did not turn out to be too good. But Sam Darnold goes in there, and it's an interesting comment today from Bill Belichick on the Pat McAfee show. Belichick said that the people he had talked to around the league, and I imagine he's rather connected, had told him that they liked Sam Darnold. And I had heard this as well from people that had worked with Darnold in previous teams, that they did like the way that Sam Darnold carried himself as a quarterback. And they really did look at the circumstances that he had been under and said, this is the reason why this guy has struggled so much, not necessarily him as a quarterback. And we're seeing him now when he has all the things that he can work with. And I think he's been more accurate than he's ever been, though, before, certainly more confident. And the receivers catch everything now that Naylor has been as good as he is. There are schemed receivers open. The play action game worked out very good yesterday, the running game. And like, which one of these things is going to fall off the map? It would only be if Sam Darnold, if I thought he was playing totally reckless and getting away with it. That was the discussion from 2017, because I was thinking to myself the other day about 2017 and how we spent so much of that season. And, you've had to have been following the show all the way back to my AM radio days to know this, but we spent so much of the show debating whether Case Keenum could actually be good for an entire season, and whether Case Keenum could be the quarterback onto the future. And there was this real distraction dynamic to it with Teddy coming back, and we're not knowing what Sam Bradford is going on. There isn't any of that, and there really isn't any question about the man's talent with Sam Darnold. And I don't feel like he's played crazy reckless and gotten away with it. He's certainly had his moments. That backward pass that Brandon Powell picked up and saved his bacon was pretty good. And there's a couple passes that are into tight traffic, but I don't know what game doesn't have those from even good quarterbacks. If he continues to protect the football the way that he has, this isn't going anywhere. The only question is at some point, does that regress just the way he's playing and protecting the football? But now the sample size has grown all the way back to 2022 of Sam Darnold not playing like a psycho with the ball. And it's been a while since he was that crazy turnover-worthy play guy that existed in 2021 and before that with the New York Jets. is this a different Sam Darnold? It looks like it. It really looks like it. And we could get fooled in all sports. All sports work this way. The Jeremy Lin sanity, the hot baseball hitter comes in, hits a bunch of home runs, but that's not who they really are. But when somebody has this level of raw talent, it's so much easier to buy into the idea that it can continue. So let me scroll back up to the top and start reading through your comments and thoughts on this. I just want to know your emotional state at the moment with the Vikings at 3-0, a record that I don't think anybody really expected. So Digits says, my expectations involve assessing what needs this team have exposed throughout the games that they played so far. Yeah, I mean, what has stood out as far as things that could get them is, I think, what you're getting at. What could get them? And the two things that come to mind to me are Kenny Clark could get them and has before and very likely will again. And Garrett Bradbury, I'm absolutely certain that he is dealing with a knee injury, because there have been several times that he has grabbed at his knee during games, and it looks like he's struggled to get up a couple of times with the knee. Him going up against Kenny Clark, Ed Ingram, they got smashed in the middle in this last game. And that's where you do get your interceptions on the hand going forward. Somebody hits it, pops up in the air. That's where you get, the quarterback getting hit hard, the constant distraction of not being able to step up in the pocket. Nick Mullins and I had a conversation about interior pressure. Maybe last year I wrote a story about it, and he just said that as a quarterback, you really can't stand interior pressure, because that's where you're moving up into. And when you have bodies in your face all the time there, like, that's where your vision is. That's where all your hitches and your step ups are. And it is very uncomfortable for a quarterback. Against Green Bay, it's going to be uncomfortable. And going forward, there's lots of teams that can create that pressure. So that's part of it. And that could cause turnovers. And then on the defensive side, it's really, can you keep covering? Because one thing that they have to their advantage, and the defense earned it, but they have played with a lead a lot, which is a lot easier for a defense. How are they going to cover when they are playing a close game, when they're playing against a team that does have their number that day, and they do have to get a key stop over and over again, as opposed to, well, we got up because of a turnover, and a couple of really good plays by the Texans were negated by penalties because Sean Hockley was in his freaking bag yesterday. But I mean, aside from that coverage concern, I mean, that's pretty much all I could say about the defense, but they're being helped out so much by the amount of pressure that's being created up front. There will be games where they don't just eliminate the other team entirely. Even the greatest defenses ever have had games where they struggle. That's actually where I want to see them. Can they still find a way to make enough plays, even if the other team does have their number? So they haven't had that test yet, even though they've played good teams. JP says the Green Bay game will be tough. Willis is playing well, and Matt LaFleur calling some awesome plays. Also, Kenny Clark facing his son, Garrett Bradbury. Right, that's going to be a big issue. Never goes unnoticed. There's also a chance of Love playing. That is a dynamic to this game that adds a layer of intrigue for sure. Is I guarantee you the Packers are not naming their starting quarterback this week. They will not tell you who has been practicing, how many reps. But the fact that Jordan Love was close last week does make you think that he could be pretty close to returning as a starter, and then they could go back to playing their normal offense as opposed to the Air Force offense, which has been really effective for them the last couple of weeks. But I don't know if it would be they're going up against Matt LaFleur, who is so familiar with the Vikings and familiar with what Brian Flores brings to the table and just how they play. So, I think the division adds a different element than San Francisco or especially Houston, that has no familiarity at all coming in here. Daniel says, can we talk about the rankings second and fewest points allowed? It is something. And I've said this before on the show, and I like saying it, is when a defense is good, it's so much fun. It is so much fun to watch because the players get into it. They celebrate every big sack and every play, and you feel like the other team is suffocating. And when the other team is just falling apart out there and jumping offside, and they're not getting their motions correct, and the quarterback looks shook. I mean, it's not just me, it's everyone who enjoys football loves watching that feeling of the other team drowning out there against the defense. Unless, of course, it's your own team's offense. Then, of course, you're not enjoying it. But if you're the Texans fans watching that, you had to be shocked and miserable. But that's what this defense is doing. And it's really entertaining when a defense plays this well. And I don't think that there's anything fluky about it, because every one of the players who is doing it has all done it before. I mean, when we talk about Jonathan Grenard, going back to last year, I had this stat today from PFF that uh, he ended last season, after week 6 of last season with the Texans, there were only 3 games where he didn't have at least 4 pressures. This is what he does. And ESPN has a win rate stat where he was the 6th best in the entire league. Every stat points to this is who Jonathan Grenard is. The reason that Van Ginkel is here is because he did this same thing with the Miami defense that ranked so high when he was playing for Brian Flores there. Stephon Gilmore won the defensive MVP and was good for Dallas last year. These are not things that are really surprising from these particular players. Maybe the only surprise is Patrick Jones has been quite good. Jihad Ward's been a solid role player. I'm not stunned by that because he had been around. Kamu Grugier-Hill making the impact plays that he did may have been a little bit of a surprise, but he's been around as well. So every one of these guys, you could draw back into their histories, as opposed to, oh, hey, they're getting, if it was Dallas Turner with 5 sacks in a game or something, you might go, well, we'll see if he can keep that going. But Dallas Turner doesn't even have to be a major impact player on this team for them to succeed defensively. And when you can draft the guy in the first round and not even ask him to be everything for your defense and have a game where he doesn't play, and yet you perform that well, that just shows how good and how deep you really are. So that I don't see a weak point that is so weak where I'm saying, well, eventually once that gets exposed, it's over. But maybe it'll show itself with injuries or something like that as we go along. But that's why this start makes me think that it can continue to succeed as we go forward. Mike says, I'm ready to get hurt again, but the direction of this team is on. I have hope that we'll one day see them in a Super Bowl. And you can't really start going there yet, of course, and saying those words Super Bowl. The only thing I would say, though, to that end is they have shown this group, this coaching staff, this general manager, they have shown a capability to build a team that is complete and very, very good in a short amount of time, which is a lot of competence for a front office, and a lot of good decisions had to be made for the front office. And if they go to JJ McCarthy, they will still have the cap space advantage. I'm not going to go there yet on the Sam Darnold long-term quarterback because we're just not there yet. We're not to that point yet where we're talking about this team having some really difficult decision to make. If we get 10 weeks into the season and Darnold is an MVP, then we're going to have that conversation of what do they do with JJ McCarthy sitting behind him. But when the team has been really well coached, maybe the most well-coached team in the NFL, aside from Pittsburgh being 3-0 is very impressive. Green Bay winning the last couple of games is really impressive with their backup quarterback who just got to their team. But a top 5, top 3 coaching job in the entire NFL so far by Kevin O'Connell, a top 3 defense by Brian Flores, and the roster construction giving everything that they need at almost every position across the board. If you can do this within a couple of years from arriving here to a pretty messy situation, then I'm kind of believing that you can do it long term. So that's why I'm more or less buying into this team being good in the long term. And we're going to find out just how much my good friend Manny Hill is also buying in to the Minnesota Vikings start to the season. Mr. Hill, how are you this evening?
I'm quite good. I'm kind of making fun of myself right now because I forgot that there were 2 Monday night games tonight. So I'm like, I've got my, computer on right now, and I'm trying to like find a way to get both games on the screen at the same time so I can watch both. But
Now you're
yeah,
really asking to melt the internet, Manny. You've had such a good track record this year. Last year, your head froze all the time with your internet, but this year you've done so well. If you start streaming this and two games at the same time, it will absolutely be a problem. So I've been asking our listeners, and I figured out how to get comments on the screen again. So I'm very happy about
I
that.
can see them.
I've been asking the listeners how they feel, what their emotions are. And I don't want to mess around with you too long. I want to get you picking this schedule almost immediately. So I hope you're prepared for that. But give me your feelings. Give me your thoughts and feelings. 3-0. Are you ready to be heard again?
Am I ready to be hurt again? No, not really, because I still, I mean, even though I'm really excited about the start, I still don't think that this is a team that's gonna like go to the Super Bowl or anything like that. So I'm just kind of, as we've kind of talked about these first couple of weeks, I'm just kind of in the living in the moment with this team right now and just kind of enjoying what I'm seeing each game with each week and not really thinking so much. And of course, I'm being a little bit of a hypocrite because we're going to pick the schedule at some point here tonight. But um, I'm not, so much looking ahead of to like, well, what are they going to do against the New York Jets in a couple of weeks? I'm just thinking about, okay, they're 3-0, they're in first place, they're going to play the Packers this week. What is this going to look like? Is Jordan Love going to actually come back and play? It sounds like maybe he will. That's going to be a really intriguing and interesting matchup. So I'm just kind of living in the moment with this team and enjoying the ride right now.
I actually like that a lot. I like the living in the moment season. I've been going with let's just see what happens season, but living in
Yeah.
the moment season sounds pretty good to me as a tagline. Let's not screw around. I want to get right to you picking the schedule because I got several tweets after they won on Sunday of people saying, "Oh, I can't wait to see how many wins Manny gives them this week." So I like this as an every single week bit. And you were a little skeptical. I did pick the Vikings, and you picked the Texans, and it was a total blowout. So your accuracy is not perfect so far. In fact, I think you're 1-2 so far of your attempts to pick the schedule, maybe like everybody else who did it. So let's get right into it. September 29th, I will travel to Lambeau Field. And how about this? Crazy factoid here. Stephon Gilmore has never played at Lambeau before. Do you believe that? His whole career. He's never played there.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it kind of makes sense because he was in the AFC for a long time
He's
with
like 35.
Buffalo. Yeah, yeah. I mean, but he was in Buffalo and New England for a long time. And he spent a year in India. Well, because he spent a year with the Colts
And the Panthers.
and the Panthers, yeah. And the Vikings played the Colts the year he was with the Colts. That was the 33-0 comeback game, I
It must
think.
have been
And
Panthers at Colts that year or something. But anyway, I just thought
yeah,
we don't have to get too caught up in this. I just thought it was an interesting factoid from the locker room today that he
yeah.
said he's looking forward to his first time. So win or loss at Lambeau Field, Mr. Hill.
I'm gonna call it a loss.
All right. Good night,
And now
Manny.
everybody in the comment section is just gonna,
Good night,
they're gonna rip
man.
me
It
to
was great to
shreds
have you
now.
on again. I'm not paying for this appearance. Okay, 3-1. And this, I don't think that this team is going to do letdown games, but they could do ran into a really good team on the road games. These last two, you have to keep in mind these last two have been at home.
Yeah.
And CJ Stroud had never played in that building before. So okay, 3-1. The Jets in London, 8:30 start time. Are the Vikings going to take on different accents to their play in England?
I know the Jets have won a couple games in a row now. After looking terrible in week 1 against San Francisco. But I'm gonna call this a win for the Vikings because I'm still not really sure how good the Jets actually are. They beat a bad New England team this past Thursday, and they beat up on a bad Tennessee team the week before. So I'm not really sure that the Jets are really that serious of a team so far. So I'll call that a win for the Vikings.
Okay, 4-1 at the bye, just like everybody had it. And isn't that
Woo.
amazing though? You only need to win one of the next two. I love that math, just how that ends up playing out when you get to 3-0. Because if you win one of the next two, you're 4-1 going to the bye. They come out of the bye at US Bank Stadium and play Mr. Jared Goff and the Detroit Lions.
I will call that a loss.
Okay, so 2 division losses for this team. Just call them a fraud, Manny. All right, 4-2, heading out to LA Thursday night. I will be there. I haven't booked my travel yet, but I'm planning on it. 4-2 on Thursday Night Football.
A couple of weeks ago, I was a little skeptical about this game, but based on what I've seen, and I know the Rams just beat the Niners yesterday, but the Niners are really beat up right now. As we've seen, they got a lot of guys that are banged up. I'm going to call that a win.
Okay.
Against the Rams.
5-2. I could see that. Indianapolis and Anthony Richardson really, truly has not learned yet how to throw a football so far. It will take time. He has very few starts in the NFL, but it has not been a great start for him. This is a tough one to see the Vikings losing. Brian Flores against Anthony Richardson, but don't let that shade your opinion. So you've got them at 5-2.
Yeah, I got this as a win too. Anthony Richardson just really inaccurate throws right now and just kind of some bad decisions that we're seeing. And I think that Brian Flores will eat that for lunch. So I'll call that a win.
All right. To 6-2 to face the Jacksonville Jaguars. Everybody who listens to the show knows I'm planning a golf trip for this one. Paul Hodowanik is down there now, former intern of Purple Insider, working for PGAtour.com. And I'm bringing the sticks, and we're going to make a weekend out of it, which will be great for me. But will it be great for the Vikings?
It's crazy. The Rams game is going to feel like maybe a bit of a home game because Vikings fans kind of travel pretty good out there, and the Rams don't really have a fan base. It doesn't seem like. It's kind of the same thing with the Jaguars too. And I just don't think Jacksonville's very good. There's talent there. Trevor Lawrence is talented, obviously, but I'm not sure that Doug Peterson has a real sense of what's going on down there. They just don't seem to be very good. So I'll call that a win for the Vikings too.
Okay, so are we to 7-2 at the moment? And
Yeah.
I had to call you a hater on the 2 losses. Tennessee, and Will Levis, who everybody heard going into the draft that year that they did not like Will Levis, and they had a chance to draft him, and they said no, thank you. And I think we are seeing exactly why, because the decision-making of Will Levis is the same as it was in college, which is bad. Road game in Nashville. This could be the letdown game if you're picking a random letdown game, but they're playing the Titans November 17th. That's what did you say? Is it 8-2?
They would be 7-2 after the Jaguars.
Okay, 7-2. Maybe I already put this down as a win, but what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, we might as well just say 8-2 because that'll be a win. Yeah, I just if Will Levis is still starting by then, I don't even know who their backup is. In the scenario that maybe Levis gets benched, but he's just 2 bad interceptions again this week, and he's just not good, man. So I'll call that a win.
The backup quarterback is Malik Will. No, they gave away Malik Willis, surprisingly, to the Packers and helped them win. 8-2 headed to Soldier Field, which has not been the same level of House of Horrors recently. I will say Caleb Williams looked a lot better.
Yes.
Not great and still had a couple turnovers, but a lot better in his most recent game. I imagine by this point he will have developed to some extent, but do you think the Vikings can go to 9-2, man?
I think this is where we might see a stumble, not because I think that the Bears are like going to be great, because right now it doesn't look like they're going to be all that good. But I do think, to your point about Caleb Williams, I do think he'll be playing much better by then. And Soldier Field is just always kind of a crazy place to play for the Vikings, even in games where they win. But so I'll put this down as a loss.
Okay, 9-3, and you've given them all division losses. That's not.
Yeah, they're 0-4 in the division at this point. That's crazy.
Not great. Is that 3 or is that 4? That's 3, right? Because it was or is it 4? Yeah, I thought your losses were Green Bay, Detroit, and Chicago.
Yeah,
is there any other
3.
one?
That's
okay,
3.
so 9-3. All right, so now they're playing Arizona at home December 1st.
I will call that a win.
Okay, now to 10-3, facing off
Oh
with
my God.
Michael Penix on December 8th or Kirk Cousins possibly, who can't QB sneak. Now we know that Kirk Cousins cannot QB sneak. Just real quick, and I don't want to take too many off ramps here on this subject, but if your quarterback can't QB sneak at the end of a game, that's not great for you. And the other night was the Kirkiest Kirk game that has ever kirked. It stayed close the whole time. They had chances to win, but they didn't get there. And they had a bad call that their fans were blaming and saying the game was rigged. And it was like super drama at the end. Classic Kirk game. So 10-3 with maybe the revenge game of all revenge games for this season.
And the funny thing last night too is the Chiefs didn't even play well.
No.
That's what's really even funnier about that. Yeah, I don't know what to think about Atlanta. I just can't figure them out. They just look like a 9-8 or 8-9 team right now, which is kind of par for the course with Kirk Cousins. Yeah. So I will call that a win at home. I got them at 11 and was that 11-3?
Yeah, 11-3. This is why everyone wanted you to pick this schedule. This will change, I imagine, at some point. Seattle, though, heck of a team out there in Seattle that they will travel to at 11-3.
We got one more with Chicago.
Oh, Chicago. I'm sorry, I looked past that. Yeah, home at Chicago.
I'll call that a win.
Okay, so they're 12-3. And this is one of the great seasons in Vikings history to this point, going to Seattle. Sorry, I jumped the gun because I'm so interested in Seattle.
I think we got them at 11-3.
Okay. Yeah, 11-3. Yeah.
Yeah.
How hard is it for us to have written this down instead of trying to keep track of it amidst other conversations?
I was
11-3 going to Seattle.
I was told there would be no math. That I will put that down as a loss. I think Seattle looks pretty good right now.
Really good. Yeah.
Yeah. They look really good. That's a tough place to play. Yeah, I'll put that down as a loss.
All right. Versus Green Bay, December 29th, as they are 11-4 playing at US Bank Stadium on December 29th.
I will put that down as a win.
Okay. They are 12-4 going to Detroit. I imagine this has to be for the division.
Yeah. And, in previous times when I've picked out the schedule, I've kind of assumed that the Vikings would win this game because the Lions might be resting starters because they would have had the division locked up already. But if you're telling me that this is actually going to be for the division, this might actually be a game that's really tight and competitive. And I'm going to put this down as a Detroit Lions victory.
Okay. 12-5 season for the Minnesota Vikings this year. And somehow you don't sound like a crazy person because of what we've seen over these 3 games. And it had to be, to get you to that point, it had to be a very convincing win over the Houston Texans. And my goodness, it absolutely was that. So let's get to our comments here, Manny. We got a lot of conversation here in the chat, which is awesome. Great to see a huge crowd here tonight. Everybody wanted to show up to see how crazy Manny would go with the schedule. I don't think you went completely nuts, but the fact that I'm saying 12-5, you don't sound completely nuts, really says something about the way they've played these first 3 weeks. Chris says, haven't been this excited for the team since 2017. And Clifford says, this is a better team than 2017. I'm not ready for that level of heat, Manny. I'm just not there yet.
That was the best defense in the National Football League in 2017, and it
run,
really
pass,
wasn't even,
and points.
Yeah, it was not even really like a conversation at that point. It was just, you could just watch and see how good that defense was. And this defense is really, really good. I'm about ready to call this like one of the top 5 defenses in the NFL, the way they've played these first 3 weeks. But I don't think they're as good as 17. 17 is like, I would encourage fans to go back and just, if you find just YouTube highlights from that season and just watch that defense, the way they covered, the way they rushed the passer. There was really not a weakness at all on that defense at all. So yeah, it's close, but I don't quite think that they're 2017.
And even though I think Sam Darnold is a better quarterback than Case Keenum, that's not a hot take. Case Keenum, for one season, his results, he played like a top 10 quarterback. They had a top 10 passing game. The running game can probably be a little bit better this year, but there's 2 players that would make me say they're not there yet for 2017. Linval Joseph and Xavier Rhodes. The defensive tackles have been good. I mean, best possible scenario this year, not Linval 17. And Xavier Rhodes, I really like what Stephon Gilmore has done. Xavier Rhodes that year, Island, Julio Jones, Antonio Brown, like a bunch of different wide receivers, Mike Evans, and shut them down throughout that season. Not quite what they're doing now. They're not really doing the island thing, even if Gilmore is doing some traveling, but they're going to have to prove that they can slow top receivers over and over again the way they did that year. I don't think it's crazy far off, though, because of how violent they are and how they pressure the quarterback. And the defensive coordinator is an absolute mastermind. So I think that they will be a top 5 defense now, but I don't know about number 1 in run, pass, and points. That might be hard to achieve. Is the Faithful says, this is making me nervous because this team's success doesn't feel fluky. And that's my thing, Manny. I feel like I've gone over it repeatedly in my brain and on this show and been like, wait, where's the regression point? Where's the, well, this is going to happen. It really is just if it's Darnold or not.
Yeah. I mean, it all really depends on him because it seems like this defense is going to be this good, provided everybody can kind of provided they can stay as healthy as possible. It doesn't really feel like what this defense is doing is fluky. I think it just comes down to can Sam Darnold maintain this level of play? And it doesn't mean, as we saw yesterday, it doesn't mean he has to throw for 300 yards. It just means he has to, make good decisions, run the offense, execute, make a play once in a while when it's needed, and just not turn the ball over, not, throw the ball to the other team. If he can do that, then yeah, I mean, this train can keep going the way it's going, but it's just going to depend on what he's able to do to kind of maintain some consistency.
Daniel says it's easier because of who we beat. And that I completely agree with. If they had gone 3-0 against mediocre teams, then I would say, okay, let's really see them prove it to us. Great start, but go ahead and play somebody good, right? We went through that in 2019 where they had beaten a lot of teams, but every time they went up against a contender, it seemed like they fell short. With this team, they've already gone up against 2 contenders and beaten both of them. Topaz says in denial, but trending up. There has to be some cognitive dissonance with everyone watching this because this is just not what was really expected. And everybody that I talk to, whether it's fans or just other people in the media or whatever, okay, what are you picking their record as? What are you picking their record at? And it was mostly 9-8, 10-7, 8-9, somewhere in that range. No one was saying that there was even the possibility of 12, which is still very, very far off. And you're a crazy person for picking it that way. But even to have that be discussed of this team being one of the better teams in the NFL, that was not on anybody's radar. So I imagine that some folks are holding on to a little bit of, this can't be real, right? This can't be this good. But I guess Vikings history is always that. Overreaction Bot says comfortable wins are so novel. That is, I was thinking about that, Manny. When was the last time in a Vikings win that I was just kind of looking at the crowd, looking outside, thinking about what I was going to write at the end of a game, as opposed to a mad scramble to write an instant reaction because the game had ended in some crazy way? What a weird feeling yesterday to just be going, oh yeah, this one's kind of over and it's sort of been over.
I'm trying to go back, maybe 2019 during that Kirktober stretch where they won 4 games in a row because they had the bad loss in Chicago where everybody was pissed off. Diggs went AWOL and everything. And then they had those 4 straight wins. It was against pretty low level competition. It was like the Giants and the Lions were bad back then. But that was the last time where they won comfortably over somebody that I can think of.
It really was. It was even the week 1 was the biggest victory they had since the Chargers game late in 2019. That was a season of blowouts. They faced David Blau or something when they played the Lions. And I remember showing up to the stadium that day feeling like, oh, why am I even here? This is one I could have stayed home for because this team is going to bash David Blau's brains in. And then they did. There might be some feelings of that later in this season of, well, okay, this team's playing a backup quarterback. This one's over, on to the next one. And again, that has not been the feeling. And that's really a testament. We make it about Kirk, and he does play that way throughout his career, but it's also really about the defense, that the defense since 2019 could not close the team out. They just didn't have the talent. And we saw it from Flores last year. They did it a few times against bad teams, but not against good teams. And with Mike Zimmer's defenses 2020 and 2021, and of course Donatel, the Donatel disaster, you could never walk away. I remember our friend Judd in the game against the Colts. Yeah, he walks away from that one. They come back, but that they would do that too, though. They didn't even have blowouts in the other way very often because they would always come back. So that might not be the same way with this team. Clifford says very deserved 3-0. I'm thinking at least playoffs, if not a deep run in the playoffs. That's where I can't quite get there yet because there's so many more tests to pass before we could start trying to figure out what kind of playoff team that they might be. We can't even really start talking about the playoffs until halfway through the season where they sit. Daniel says still want a road win against a legit playoff contender after week 6. Check that box and the sky is the limit. Well, if you're talking about after week 6, they don't, I mean, that's the Seattle game and Detroit late in the season. There's not that many tests against really good teams in the whole second half of the season outside of the division. They play their division games, but when you're talking about the South, all the South teams are bad. I thought all the South teams might actually be good. They might be the South teams again. All bad.
Yeah, I mean, when I first picked the schedule a couple of weeks ago and had them at like a 9-8, 10-7 kind of mark, this was with the thought that, okay, they're probably going to lose to San Francisco. They're probably going to lose to Houston and be 1-2 out of the first 3 games. I mean, we were thinking like, if they can get to the first 7 games at like 3-4, we're still kind of having a really interesting we're still having interesting conversations about this team. But you win those 2 games against the Niners and Texans. Now it's like you're 3-0, and now you're looking at the second half of the schedule, and you're like, this is if they put themselves in really good position before the bye and come out of the bye, you got a tough test with Detroit at home though. But then it's like LA, okay, the Rams don't really know how good they are. They look, really bad against Arizona, and they found a way to beat San Francisco yesterday. And then like Indianapolis, who I thought would be better than what they've shown so far, they don't look very good. Jacksonville, I thought would be good. They don't look very good right now. I'm not surprised to see Tennessee be bad, but you never know with a team like that. So this is looking like, if everybody can stay healthy, this is going to be a really fun team to watch, and it's going to be really interesting that we're going to have games in like week 15, week 16, week 17 that are going to be really, really, really interesting.
I think at some point there's going to be a loss that they have that we didn't see coming, and how they respond to that will be a great test for Darnold, because Darnold in the past, and a lot of this is driven by who's around him, and that's been talked about just a little bit, but he also would get into ruts like with the other teams that he played for, where it wasn't just 1 week, it was a multiple week. He's down and he's playing bad for 3 weeks in a row and can't really pull himself out of it. Well, he hasn't played bad for any weeks in a row, and the infrastructure is really great. You can't deny that when you just throw the ball up toward Justin Jefferson, he's going to catch it 98% of the time, unless it was yesterday where he was trying to catch it with a jammed thumb and he just kind of, I can't catch it. But I don't know why he was in the game at that point anyway. But still, the fact that they're getting stronger on offense with the supporting cast, we see TJ Hawkinson walking around. He looks like he's going to be ready to go pretty quickly here, and seems like he's chomping at the bit, and also was really walking tall in the locker room today after, Iowa over Minnesota. So he had some things to say about that as well, but he's going to be coming back. Addison, I think, is going to come back this week, at least the way that Kevin O'Connell made it sound like today, which was not really the headline because Sam Darnold had an MRI. And when that happens, everybody watch out. We got an MRI here. But he did mention that Addison is in a good place. So we could start to see that ramp up. Now Naylor is wide receiver 3, but more confident wide receiver 3 because he believes he can do it. So this team does feel like it's going to get stronger around Sam Darnold to maybe prevent something like that big dip, like they have been known to take in the past, and so is he. Nick says, I'm believing this team is legit. I'm hoping we have a huge problem answering keep Sam or hope JJ next offseason. We can't keep both. Yeah, I just don't know what to do with that problem yet, Manny, because once I start rolling down all the scenarios, I almost can't stop myself. I can't stop myself. Oh, well, if he does this, but if he has this many touchdowns and they get that many wins, but what if they win in the play? But what if they don't win? And then I just want to go 3-0. 3-0. Let's not do this yet with the Sam Darnold problem, but it's a good point that if they play really, really well, we are going to be having that discussion. And if we are, then we know it was a really great season for this team. And I also just want to point out too, let me ask you this, Manny, what week do we get to say to those people who maybe ranked Sam Darnold as the 30th best quarterback going into the league? How do you feel today? If you ranked Jacoby Brissett ahead of Sam Darnold, like, you good? I've always had this rage against quarterback rankings because my issue is that they never factor the team around the quarterback. They just go with the recent performance and if they like the guy in the draft. And that's all that ever seems to be considered. And I wrote an article about this a couple years ago about Jalen Hurts. He was being ranked the 20th best quarterback in the league. And my point was, they're not going to have the 20th best offense in the league. They've got all these weapons and stuff. And with Darnold, I thought, how in the world could you put Deshaun Watson and Jacoby Brissett ahead of Sam Darnold when he's got all these things at his disposal? And here we are. So I don't 3 wins is still not the point where you start dunking on those people, but some of the dialogue around Sam Darnold was basically you'd present all this evidence and you've got the board with all the pictures and it's tied together with yarn. You're like, see, I think he could maybe do it. And then some people would just go, he sucks, bro. Stop. And I just thought that was really unfair throughout the offseason. And now here we are at 3-0. So I don't know.
I think after week 7, after the Lions come here to US Bank Stadium, depending on how that goes and depending on like what the Vikings record is at that point, I think that is like if they're because that would be what 6 games at that point, right out of the bye.
Yeah.
If the Vikings are 4-2 or 5-1 and Darnold is really playing well, and like let's say they beat Detroit. Let's say they're 5-1 after the Lions game and they just beat the Lions. I mean, at that point, I am dunking on people. Because at some point you're gonna have to just like see enough and have enough of an understanding. Like, okay, yeah, this guy. We know how talented he is. He's on a team that has really good infrastructure, a really good offensive mind as a head coach who's I think shown that he's really good at like getting a lot out of players and building confidence and for guys like Sam Darnold, especially who've gone through a lot and been around a lot of bad coaching and a lot of bad situations, dealing with the New York media, getting ousted out of there and going to Carolina and having to deal with Matt Rule, and if Kevin O'Connell can kind of continue this sort of uplifting and I don't know what the other word is I'm looking for, but just that continued building of confidence. At some point, you just got to give the guy his flowers,
Well, yeah. And I think that was such a big part of the environment conversation. And so I did want to talk to you about this with the national media's attention now on the Minnesota Vikings. I saw no less than about 10 all 22 breakdowns of Sam Darnold, of Brian Flores' defense. At 3-0, they have all of a sudden gone, the Vikings, like they're a team. And so much through the offseason, and I don't blame these people. They have to try to track 32 teams. It's very difficult. But I thought that the dialogue was just kind of lazy about this team. Like, they'll probably finish last. Caleb Williams is more exciting than them. And when JJ McCarthy went down, it's like, oh, well, their season's kind of over because McCarthy went down. And it's like, wait, he wasn't even going to play at
Right.
first. And so much of the focus was on, well, they've got a rookie quarterback. It's going to be Sam Darnold. And it's sort of dismissive of, and there's so many people talking football that I'm not directing this at anyone in particular, but it just felt like the whole team, because Sam Darnold was their quarterback, even in the betting markets, was just totally dismissed. And after walking out of training camp, I didn't feel like that was really fair. So now the attention is on them. I don't think this team will have a ton of problems dealing with that because of the number of veterans, but I am interested in Sam Darnold and how he navigates this now, because he just went from the no one is talking about the Vikings or Darnold. I mean, good luck if you're a national reporter writing a story about him getting a click until week 1. And then now you are kind of the darling of the NFL as everyone talks about how good you have been. And this team dealing with that expectation, I think, is something to keep track of as we go forward.
It is. And I think another thing to kind of keep track of, if this defense continues to play the way it has, which I think both you and I think that they will, now how much more attention starts to get paid to like Brian Flores and the job that he's doing with this defense, because the national media, the only time they were talking about Brian Flores in the last month or so was when the Tua stuff came out. They were completely kind of ignoring about, all the moves that the Vikings made in the offseason to bring in Andrew Van Ginkel, to bring in Jonathan Grenard, to bring in, Blake Cashman and so many of these other guys. And they're not really noticing that it's not just Sam Darnold sort of possibly, revitalizing his career. It's also this defense and the way they have shut down, Brock Purdy and CJ Stroud now in consecutive weeks. Like, at what point does that start to be, noticed by the national media? It's like, okay, well, this defense is playing really well, so Sam Darnold doesn't have to throw for 400 yards for this team to win, and that can take a lot of pressure off of him. I think it's going to be really fascinating to kind of find out, like, when not just Sam Darnold, but like the entire team and the way they're winning these games starts to get a lot of the attention.
Yeah, I think that now is the time that we're starting to see that, and everyone is starting to take notice of it, which, last year there was a little bit of it when they were winning with Josh Dobbs, and then some people said, oh, Brian Flores is doing a good job with that defense. But now when you beat teams like this, then it's like prolific in the way that they've played over the last 2 weeks, which is getting attention. And I thought that you were going to go in the direction of, well, now is he going to get a head coaching job? But that's also too far down the road for me. I still don't think so. Brian Murphy said this morning that he does think so. Maybe I think it's a Steve Spagnuolo situation where he's just going to be a great defensive coordinator for this team for a long time, which speaks to the future of where this franchise can go and be a contender for years to come. It feels too early to say things like that, but yet not so much, as we've seen 2 years of Flores developing and building this defense kind of in his vision. And that's been impressive as well. But another good point, though, is as everyone starts to pay attention, that means everyone tries to solve the problem of Brian Flores' defense, to try to figure out how to deal with all the Vikings checks and changes at the line of scrimmage. And the answer might be more up tempo or more no huddle or something. This cat and mouse game plays out over 17 weeks. And this is why, like, Cliff Kingsbury in his past had the first few weeks of the season, he was great. And then everyone figured out what he was doing, and then it wasn't great anymore. And that whole storyline following it will be interesting as well. But yeah, I think that this team was just so shoved off in a corner that now it's going to be a different dynamic the whole rest of the season, as the expectations have been set at 3-0. So are you the surprise team that last year finished toward the bottom of your conference standings that's, oh wow, we never saw it coming? Or are you the team that started out 3-0 and then disappointed everybody after that? Because that is a motif that we have seen before in Vikings history. Edwin said, of course there is concern, but the way the Vikings are playing, I feel really good about them. My confidence comes from how they are physically beating teams. that is the most fun part, Manny, is just how physical this team is. It is the most physical defense they've had since 2017. And it's put together with, I think, just a bunch of crazy dudes who really love football, but are legitimately psychotic about it. I mean, Harrison Smith is nuts. The way that he goes flying into people. Stephon Gilmore has been more physical than I expected him to be. I mean, I knew that he was that way his entire career, but you're like, okay, he kind of showed up late in camp and he's just flying in and hitting people. It I is how much part of it has, in terms of you being crazy high on this team now at 12-5 with your pick, how much of it is just simply how fun it's been? And that's the evaluation I'm trying to make here, because when people say that, I'm like, yeah, man, they have been physical as heck. Is it that we're being objective and saying, well, this is how many games they should win, this is where they really are? Or is it just, wow, it has been such an entertaining couple of games of them just whipping people's tails that maybe we're too high? Is that possible, or do you think not?
It kind of reminds me, and I'm not, when I first say this, the viewers and listeners are going to think, well, Manny, think about how that season finished up. Not saying it's going to happen that this season is going to finish that way, but I do remember going back to 2016 and the way they started out 5-0. It was to a point where I was actually really like enjoying watching the defense, because they were just beating everybody up and they were physical and they were causing turnovers and they were sacking the quarterback, and where it was just like fun watching, where it was like if the offense had to punt, it's like, oh, okay, that's fine. I get to watch the defense again. You know what I mean? And it's kind of like I'm getting those same type of vibes. Now we know how 2016 finished up. It finished up terribly, and even the defense kind of late in the season really kind of melted down in some spots. But I just think those are the same kind of vibes I get, though. That 5-0 start in 2016, it's the same kind of thing where it's like, okay, the Vikings just had to punt, but that's okay. I get to watch like Andrew Van Ginkel again, like maybe make something really happen. That's where the excitement comes for me, like, because I really like what I'm seeing from that unit, and I don't think that it's going to, provide everybody stays healthy. I don't think that's going to slow down. I think that's going to stay the way it is really for the entire season.
I think it's a good comparison. And what I like about Vikings fans, by the way, is that as we go back through these seasons and mention random specific games, they all know exactly what we're talking about. Like, I don't have to explain when Odell Beckham got completely shut out by Xavier Rhodes and how much fun that was in
Yeah.
2016. Because, well, I mean, I'm sure very young people watching the show might be like, I'm going to have to look that one up on Pro Football Reference. But everybody else, like, oh, yeah, I remember that game. Odell Beckham going nuts. I think he may have gotten flagged for trying to attack Xavier Rhodes in that game. He was so frustrated. We're seeing the same frustration and the look. I remember the look on Rodgers' face when he threw that pick to Trey Waynes at the end of the week 2 game in 16. Was just like, man, like, what is this defense?
Yeah.
And that feeling does something. There is something, as everyone who loves football, that pings inside of us that's like, yes, I like that. And I like that a lot there, because it's a brilliant tactical game. But at the end of the day, it's football, and it is the physical. You want to dominate the other team. That's why I love running the ball so much. And what Aaron Jones did at the end of that game, you were like, yes, this is it. Just run over this team and put them in their coffin. Thank you. And then they did it. We haven't seen too much of that. There has been a true lack of physical dominance from the Minnesota Vikings, because they had Dalvin Cook running over people in 2020, but the defense was soft. 2021, Delvin's not the same. The offensive lines have been soft or struggled for years, and there's still some weaknesses, but they're having a left tackle that can shut out the best rushers in the world. You're like, okay, well,
Mhm.
that there is a very serious point about that in terms of people buying into the team, that it is the sheer physical dominance of these games that has made you think that this can keep going. Let's see. Scotty says, if this team continues on this trajectory, who are they trading for at the deadline to make that extra push? My brain is also not gone there yet. Good thing they signed Dalton Reisner, by the way, because that may need to be a thing after another miserable day from the
Yeah.
right guard. I don't know that they have enough draft capital to trade for people. But it would really depend on injuries. I don't like another defensive tackle. Like I actually don't know on this team, Manny, who they would have to trade for because it is a complete team at this moment.
Yeah, the only thing I can think of is like, knock on wood, if something happens to like Stephon Gilmore or something, like if he, you know, pulls a hamstring or something. I'm not obviously not wishing for that to happen and but then like maybe you'd make a trade for like a corner or something. But I to your point though, like they got what they got 3 draft picks next year?
Yeah, it's not
For a
great. I mean,
first, a
there's going to
second,
be
and like a fifth or something they got next year?
compensatory. They'll get compensatory, but
Sure.
it's not much, and you can't trade those right now.
Yeah.
Um, it really depends on what it looks like then. There will be players who get injured. Let's say you have a receiver get injured, you might look for that, or a running back or something. But I don't know if there's a necessarily need for that as they're going to get more healthy as the season goes along. But that's all I could really think of, a corner potentially. But even then, like if a Caleb Evans is your corner coming off the bench, you're not in terrible shape. Jake says, what does Sam Darnold have to accomplish this year for you all to want him back over McCarthy next year or longer? And this is the question that people, there's certain types of brain chemistry when it comes to football. This is front office brain guy, which we love. This is not
Yeah.
a criticism. There's like week to week league guy who wants to know the X's and O's and how how they're going to solve their weaknesses. And then there's front office brain guy who's always thinking about 2025. And I am both, but have not flipped on front office guy brain yet for this season. I kind of clicked that off once we get to signing Stephon Gilmore. Was like, okay, they've done their last move. Click that off. On to X's and O guy. Let's talk about matchups. The answer is pretty obvious though, isn't it? With this particular framing of the question, what does he have to accomplish? It has to be amazing. It can't just be okay. It can't just be Jeff George was like 7-3 and won a first round playoff game. It would have to be absolutely spectacular. So far, it has been. This 3-game sample has to go through the whole rest of the season to the point where they feel like we can win the Super Bowl in 2025 with Sam Darnold returning, and we have to do it. That's the only answer to the question, I think.
For me, it would have to, I mean, to me, Sam Darnold would have to win the Super Bowl MVP. He would have to win.
It's that high for you. I don't know if
Yeah.
it's that high for me.
Well, the reason why I say that though is because we have seen teams in, not exact scenarios like this, but we have seen teams go to the Super Bowl, win the Super Bowl, and move on from the quarterback that they won the Super Bowl with. I mean, we saw, Trent Dilfer. We saw Nick Foles win the Super Bowl MVP with the Philadelphia Eagles, and the Eagles came back with Carson Wentz as the starter the next year. You know what I mean? So it's gonna have to depend on like, now we've seen Kurt Warner become a starting quarterback due to an injury to the guy in front of him and have a storybook season where he wins the Super Bowl and he came back the next year as a starter for the Rams. But like Kurt Warner was like the MVP of the league and threw for 400 yards in the Super Bowl. You know what I mean? So like that at that point it was like, all right, yeah, Kurt Warner's going to be the guy going forward. That to me, because you especially you invested a first round pick in JJ McCarthy, to me the plan still has to be JJ McCarthy going forward into 2025. Now again, if Sam Darnold like throws 40 touchdowns this year and he's in the MVP conversation and then the Vikings go to the Super Bowl and win it and he's the Super Bowl MVP, then it's like, all right, yeah, let's bring this guy back and figure out the McCarthy thing after that. But I just think the plan is JJ McCarthy in 2025. And right now, I think that's what it should be.
Your bar there is probably too high. I think it's definitely too high to ask him to be the Super Bowl MVP or you're not coming back. You picked them to be 12-5. I think if they go 12-5, that is a really tough spot to be with this decision because that will have meant he played in a borderline MVP fashion. And
Sure.
when you think about, there have been other teams. Okay, how about this? The San Francisco 49ers. How crazy is this? The 49ers called Tom Brady and said, "Would you consider playing for us for a year?" And this was a real report, and went to Brock Purdy and said, "Would you mind just like hanging out for a year behind Tom Brady? And then you're the starter. But if we could get Brady, then like we got to do it, right?" And Brock Purdy told Kyle Shanahan, "Oh, yeah, absolutely. If you could bring in the GOAT, then I'll wait a year and take over after that." Of course, the GOAT decided not to play. They went to the Super Bowl. There have been plenty of instances where the best laid plans just don't end up working out. And you draft Brock Purdy when you already had Trey Lance, but you can't stick with Trey Lance once Brock Purdy takes you to the Super Bowl and is that good. There
Yeah.
is a bar for this. If Sam Darnold continues to play this well, and he's just throwing it left and right to Justin Jefferson, and he's adjusting with the offense and how defenses are adjusting to him, and they are winning and winning and winning, I find that very difficult to move on. The problem is that you have made some moves already that are expensive into the future, like Justin Jefferson, Christian Darrisaw, Jonathan Grenard, TJ Hawkinson. So if you're going to sign Sam Darnold to another year, well, you're going to have to push every salary cap button for the next year or 2 years.
Yeah.
And you're also going to have to figure out a way to sign Darnold to a contract that will keep his cap hit low while also rewarding him on the same level as other quarterbacks who have been great. Baker Mayfield made like $40 million. What you could do, though, is do that for a year or do that for 2 years. You could franchise tag him
Franchise him. Yeah.
and push everybody out. But that becomes difficult to do. The other thing is that you have to believe in what you've built for infrastructure. The one trouble is, though, and I'm still waiting for Justin Jefferson after Kirk left to demand a trade. When does that happen? Does that happen soon? Because I thought people told me that was going to happen, that Jefferson wouldn't sign a contract or play with anybody else or couldn't succeed with
Well, he's
anyone
a
else.
diva. You know that, right?
Oh,
Like
yeah.
he's a total diva because
Yeah,
that's what
why.
all these wide receivers are, you know.
Yes. If you see a receiver, just call him a diva, no matter what the facts are. But well, now maybe if the Vikings, Malik Neighbors is really good. Maybe if they had traded him for Malik Neighbors, but that was never going to happen either. The point that I wanted to make, though, with Darnold is that the team is going to, if he goes 12-5, believe in him to the point where they will really want him to continue to be their quarterback, because a completely unproven quarterback going into 2025 is not going to necessarily be as accepted as someone who has just won 12 games and is just taking you deep into the playoffs. You're going to be saying, bring him back, do the same thing over again, and add a couple of pieces and forget the salary cap. We'll use all the Wilfs money that we have. They did create a Kirk bubble for 2 years when Kirk signed, where they still were able to keep the same team together and even added someone like Sheldon Richardson in 2018. It does feel in that way. So this is where it gets really tricky, Manny. And this is why I've not wanted to go down this road, because it's so complicated.
Yeah.
But where it gets really tricky is that Kirk Cousins was Kirk Cousins, and he was only ever going to be Kirk Cousins. They got the best version of the guy in Minnesota. Credit to him. Honestly, he played better here than Washington, played his tail off, gave his heart to the team. We've always given him credit for all of that. But there was no next level to him. And we acted sometimes like, well, maybe there is. And KOC leaned into him and he was a little better. There is a different level with this guy because of the pure talent. We are not talking about a ceiling necessarily when the guy can throw a 50-yard pass in the air with his eyes closed on cruise control. I mean, the throws that he's made, the pocket mobility, the first touch. I know what you were saying. You didn't have to text me, Manny. I just know when he scrambled for that touchdown, exactly what you were thinking. You were thinking, haven't seen that type of scramble from the pocket and playmaking, right? That's where it diverges from the never pay a quarterback, that sort of thing, is that this talent is an elite, pure talent of Sam Darnold.
Do you think it will depend on, okay, let's say they go 12-5, make the playoffs, and let's say they win a playoff game, get to the divisional round. Would it then depend on like what he looks like in that division, right? Like even if they lose, might that kind of play into the decision to bring him back. Is just how he looks in, when playoff time actually comes.
That sounds like the NFL is reactionary, Manny. I would never see that happening. I'm here. Okay, I have to end this discussion or it just won't ever
I
end and
know.
we'll never get
I
back to
know.
the comments. The answer is I have no idea. I have
No.
no idea what you do at that point. If Darnold goes 12-5 and they play badly on offense and he throws 4 interceptions in the first round playoff game, but he's 12-5 and he's got 35 touchdowns, 12 picks. He's had this unbelievable year. What do you do after that? I don't know. The last impression is always the most powerful. That's how Mike Zimmer kept his job after beating the New Orleans Saints. Let's see. Daniel says, I hope we can keep it going. Hard to enjoy even the good times as a Vikings fan. Always feel like doom is lurking around the corner. Daniel is so many people, Manny. I have not. I will say, though, I don't know about you. I have not felt that from the fan base so far this year. Have you?
Not really. It seems like everybody's just really pumped and excited about what they've seen so far because I don't think anybody was expecting it. And I think everybody's just really pleasantly surprised right now. I do kind of get the sense that everybody is, or at least most people, I don't want to speak for everybody, but most people are kind of in that just living in the moment and enjoying what we've seen so far. And obviously, you hope that it continues. But let's just, again, what you've said, let's just let this play out. Let's just see what happens. Right now, it looks great. Let's just see what happens. If they lose to the Packers, lose to the Jets, and lose to Detroit out of the bye, now they're 3-3, and it's like, oh, okay, yeah, they're probably like an 8-9, 9-8 team at best. So
When you know that it's going in a good direction in the bigger picture, it feels different than when you're saying if they don't win this year, we're screwed. Because that was the feeling in 2019 for sure. That entire season was, if they don't win, people are getting fired. The Kirk thing is a disaster. I remember being in the press box in San Francisco on the phone with Judd Zolgad. He was doing the podcast. I was reporting for 1500 ESPN, and Judd was saying to me, do you think this is kind of the last dance for this team? And I said that, like, this whole team is coming apart this offseason and there's nothing left here. That's not the feeling right now. There isn't the same desperation of, well, look, if they don't win this year, it's never, ever going to happen. And that kind of thing. That really changes the dynamic of how people feel about it. There's always going to be Vikings fans because Gary Anderson missed one and because Blair Walsh missed one and the injuries and everything else who assume that the worst thing is going to happen. And so far, if you've been that guy, you've been right over and over and over again. So I don't ever blame anyone for feeling that way. I just think that the vibe is different because of where the franchise stands, as this is a window that's opening, not a window that's about to close unless you jump through it. I shot you 99 says credit to the Packers who are well coached, but are they really as good as the stats say with the level of competition they've faced? Well, the fact, Manny, that they've done it with a backup quarterback, I'm going to say, of course not. If it was Jordan Love, I'd be going, all right, well, they beat 2 easy teams, but they smashed 2 teams with a backup quarterback. I do think that the Packers are very impressive. Yes.
I think that Matt LaFleur is one of the best coaches in the National Football League. And Vikings fans are not going to like hearing anybody say anything good about the Green Bay Packers. I understand that. But this guy, Matt LaFleur, is a hell of a coach, man. And to take Malik Willis, who we have not seen play good as a professional at all, like bad. We've seen very, very bad from Malik Willis, certainly during his time with the Tennessee Titans. So nobody was expecting them. I mean, if the thought was like Jordan Love's going to be out for like 6 to 8 weeks or whatever, it's like, oh, the Packers are probably going to go like 1-6 during that stretch. You know what I mean? But what we've seen, I don't care how bad the competition is, to take that quarterback and to find a way to win with your defense making some plays and doing enough on offense. And they've got, the Packers, those receivers in Green Bay, they're young, but those guys are pretty good too. They're pretty talented too. So, and LaFleur is a really good coach. So I'm not terribly surprised by this. And I think that they should be taken very seriously for Sunday's game.
The way I look at it is you have two of the best young coaches in the NFL going at it. And LaFleur's track
Yep.
record is deeper than Kevin O'Connell's so far. He's been to the playoffs. They've blown it in the playoffs, but so did the Vikings. His ability to adjust to this offense is astounding. Their ability to run the football as successfully as they have over the years is really scary for any defense that you're going to face, because no one has had an opportunity to effectively control the game with the run against the Vikings. That's where they haven't been very good at stopping it, but it hasn't mattered because they've gotten turnovers and they've played from ahead. But I mean, Jordan Mason ran for 100 yards on them. Akers had some good runs. They just had to stop running by the second quarter because they were down 2 scores. If Green Bay gets ahead in the game, and the script of how things plays out in the game really matters to this, but their line can run block clearly. Their coach can dial it up clearly. And if Love is playing, and that means he's close enough to 100%, I still think that Jordan Love is one of the better quarterbacks in the NFL, especially in a league where there's just not that many this year. So I would be concerned about them with the way that they've played so far, which makes this game more awesome. By the way, if you say, "Oh, the Packers are frauds," who cares? Well, that's not the juice that we're looking for here. I wish we could go back and have Michaels, Deerdorf, and Frank Gifford do the previews to every game for the Vikings and talk about it. It was my favorite part, Monday Night Football, that 5-minute segment where Michaels would set it up and they would talk about the storylines of the game. It'd be Deerdorf saying, "This Green Bay Packers team has found a way to win." It was just great drama. Anyway, Bron Frickin' Solo says, prediction, Darnold balls out, Vikings trade McCarthy to the Chargers for some high picks, or Bosa, the Chargers trade Herbert to Pittsburgh. This is a front office brained person who is looking forward to next year's offseason trades. You know, the Vikings did check in on Herbert, though, like just in case. You guys going to trade Herbert and draft McCarthy? I don't know. I don't know how that's going to play out. They love McCarthy, by the way. This is what makes this so difficult. It could be, that's why I think it could be a franchise tag and tell McCarthy one more year. We're going to go for it with Darnold if that happens. That's what I think the most likely scenario might be. I can't get as far as 3-team trades just yet. Danny says, all in on this season solely for Darnold's redemption. I want to see him reignite his career and be respected. You know, Manny, if this season goes the way that you just predicted, 12-5, which I still am skeptical on whether to go that way. But if that happens, my favorite moment of it might be when he came back in the game and everybody went crazy, because everybody knows what happened with the Jets. Everybody knows what happened with the Panthers. Everybody knows how talented this guy is. And I think what everybody has also realized is how professional this guy is. And when Belichick said it today, he said, everybody that I know was rooting for this guy, and everybody I know liked this guy. I mean, Belichick has no reason to say that if it's not true. And I've heard the same thing about past places he was at. And he goes to San Francisco and he's willing to be the backup for Purdy. Purdy gets hurt in a game or didn't play well. He comes in, he plays well. They start him in a garbage time game. He plays really well. And then he comes here and they put him in a situation where everybody wants to talk about McCarthy. Everybody wants to see McCarthy. Did you hear a single word negative about McCarthy? No. Instead, it was love working with him. We're going on golf trips together. They worked great together behind the scenes. Darnold's given him advice. Darnold told him, hey, man, here's a really good way to learn the playbook, and showed him how, like I think it was the recording the plays into your phone app so you could play them through your car and listen to back so you can memorize them, and to do like mental reps in your apartment. He handled this in such an unbelievably professional way for someone that could have an attitude and an ego and cynicism toward his previous places. And none of that has been there. And I think the whole fan base senses that and wants to get behind this story really badly. And everybody else in the locker room seems to feel the same way.
It's just very, very cool. It's just really, really cool to see a guy that gets drafted high. He gets drafted into a situation that is just an absolute dumpster fire, with a head coach that didn't have a clue, in the biggest market in the league. You know, the New York media, that's a tough market to deal with. Even when you're good and you're performing and you're meeting expectations, that's a tough, like, media entity to combat with. And to get sort of kicked out of there because you're just being you're labeled as a bust. There's coaching changes and all of that stuff. Um, and then to go to Carolina and you're dealing with, an arrogant head coach who was really good in college, but thought that everything that he did at Baylor and Temple was going to carry over into the NFL, and it just didn't. And that was a disaster. And to kind of just have everybody basically just writing you off. And then you go to San Francisco, you get into that environment. You're a part of a team that goes all the way to the Super Bowl, that was in just a couple of plays of winning the Super Bowl. That stuff can be like life-changing for guys. And it really just seems like he has really seized this opportunity now, and he's going to do whatever he can to make the best of it. And that's just it. I think it speaks to the kind of character that he has, and the interactions that you were just talking about with JJ McCarthy as well. That shows like a guy that's just a very high character, really good guy, a great teammate. And those type of guys are easy to root for, and I think it makes a lot of sense. So like when we saw what happened yesterday, where he gets hurt, comes out for a play, then he comes back into the game and the crowd's going crazy and cheering his name and everything. That's just cool stuff, man. And that's why, like, again, like why I was still, even though McCarthy went down with the injury, I was still like really excited to just see how this played out, because I thought, this has a chance to be pretty good when you factor in all of the weapons and the infrastructure that this team has. We know this guy is really skilled. This has a chance to work. And if it does, really, really cool. It's going to be really, really fun to watch. So I think the whole thing is awesome. And the fan in me just hopes it really continues.
Last question for you, Manny. This has been really fun, man. It really has. How many teams would you give higher odds? Because Jeffrey points out that Colin Cowherd apparently has the Vikings going to the Super Bowl already. Hey, why not? There are no consequences to that. I picked the Vikings last week because there's no consequences to a pick, and I thought, yeah, maybe, and it worked out. So maybe it will for Colin Cowherd. But how many teams would you put right now higher Super Bowl odds or better Super Bowl odds than the Minnesota Vikings?
Okay, let's see if we can count them off. Kansas City, certainly.
Got to be Buffalo too. Josh Allen.
Yeah, Buffalo. I mean, Buffalo looks really good right now. I thought they were going to take a step back, and they look really good right now, and they've been kicking the crap out of Jacksonville tonight. So yeah, Buffalo looks great. Yeah, now it gets interesting, I think. Dallas.
I don't like Philly. I do not like what I'm seeing from Philly.
I don't like Dallas. I don't like what I'm seeing from the Cowboys defense right now. I mean,
my Super Bowl pick for Dallas looks horrible, which is not a surprise, everyone, because I get that wrong every year. So that's like the joke. But that's a bad pick.
Yeah, I mean, I still think San Francisco, even though the Vikings beat them, they're just really banged up right now. I think they can get healthy again. I think they'll
last year they went to the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
Green Bay has to have better odds than them right now, because Jordan Love just has a bigger sample of great play than Darnold.
Yeah.
And Seattle probably the same way.
Yeah. Yeah, probably Seattle. And
now the Carolinas got Andy Dalton.
Detroit.
Oh, obviously, yeah, Detroit.
Yeah, Detroit.
Yeah. Sorry, I was too busy making an Andy Dalton crack, but I just wanted to say that to the people who thought, oh, it's all the Panthers for Bryce Young, you didn't watch the game. There were receivers open. He just didn't throw it to them. Anyway, but no, Carolina's not going ahead of them. So what do we got? Like 7 there?
Yeah.
Okay.
7.
What a time to be alive, Manny.
That's exciting, man.
All right. So here's what's going to happen. I'm going to keep answering questions because I've gotten so insanely far behind in the chat, but I will speed run questions. I will see you in person on Wednesday night, because I'm going to do a little bit early of a chat Wednesday night so I can go to the Lynx game with Manny. They are in the playoffs, and that's awesome. So I will see you in person then, and everyone else will see you on Thursday night, unless we live stream us watching the Lynx game. from the arena, but we already have enough audio troubles anyway. So great to have you on. This is a really fun conversation, Manny. And Thursday night, we will preview Vikings and Packers. And I don't know who your 5 favorite Packers are of all time, but we're going to find out
Yeah.
when we get there. So thanks for your time as always. And we'll see you then, man.
Sounds good. Football. See you guys.
Football. All right. I don't know how to take Manny out of the window, so you have to do it yourself, Manny. I'm sorry. I don't know how to do this.
I'll just click the leave button.
Okay, there you go. Yeah,
See
we're still working through some things. Oh, I think, hey, there we go. Okay, I did figure it out. All right. Okay, so I am way far behind on comments, but I will not leave you all hanging. So we're going to go through these, but what it just keeps hitting me what an interesting time it is, whether it is the conversation about whether they're for real, how good they can be, who they're better than. Is Sam Darnold going to keep doing it? Is the defense one of the best that we've ever seen from the Vikings? Or is it something that's going to get exposed eventually? All of this is just so deeply fascinating. And it is a reminder of what this can be like when the team is good and how entertaining and fun and interesting it is, because so many years, and even 2022 was interesting and entertaining, but it wasn't quite the same because of how it happened. Uh, a real legitimate team that's actually winning and we're not questioning probably has to go back to 2009. And we'll see where it goes from here. But 2009 is truly the last time you could say that we weren't going, well, Keenum's going to start throwing picks, or, well, they've won every 1-score game. There isn't a right now. And that's a different feeling. It's been a while for me since I've had that. Janet says, love this defense. One concern might be Murphy. It looked like the Texans targeted him. Flores and the up front 7 are amazing and helping out the secondary tremendously. That is the weak point so far, statistically, is Byron Murphy. I still think that he's a solid player, but he's not a guy that if he gets ISO'd on Nico Collins, and there was sometimes you can't see this on TV. It was a really great play design when they threw the bomb to Nico Collins, because they had a shift and the Vikings had to adjust at the last second. And then they ran this crosser and he kind of got a little bit caught in the wash, and then it was hard for him to get caught back up. He's been totally fine so far, probably misses more tackles than the other guys. They could definitely add one more corner at some point if that's the big move they want to make going into the trade deadline, as we talked about. But as of where they stand right now, I think that their secondary is in okay shape. I think that it's a weaker point than it is Stephon Gilmore, but not so much that I think, oh, well, every week they're just going to target Murphy. Remember last year, just how much they dropped off when Byron Murphy went out. So I think he is valuable for them. Scott says Darnold is younger than Burrow. That can't be true. Is that true? That can't be. Really? Did we waste the first round pick on McCarthy? Well, I mean, I don't know. We're 3 games into this. I'm not going to say that they wasted the first round pick. And even if they did, then someone is going to trade a first round pick for him. I'm certain of that from what we saw, or at least a second round pick eventually. But that's that front office brain. That's front office brain. And we're not going there quite yet. Let's see. SF says, we vastly improved the defense this year. Can we discuss upgrading at center and right guard next year? Front office brain, SF, that's you. What would the show be like without interior O-line talk? You're exactly right. You're exactly right. What would this show be without interior offensive line talk? I still don't have any issue with Garrett Bradbury, but I think he's playing through an injury and it's causing some problems for him, because yesterday and in week 1, there were several times where he's struggled to pop up and he's holding a knee and he's kind of hunched over. And I think he's playing through something. His overall last 2 years and several weeks have been, in my opinion, average center play. And that's good for someone who also is a really good leader out there, very good at organizing the offense, and cannot be downplayed when it comes to his role in managing Sam Darnold. He is the closest thing to Darnold out there. And in joint practices, I remember talking to Bradbury after and just asked him, well, what's the operation like with Sam Darnold? And what he said was that he's more involved than he ever was with Kirk. in picking up the protections and making changes out there pre-snap, they've done a really good job of that. There hasn't been too many blitzes or times where there was confusion, and that's valuable. He will get run over sometimes, but that's valuable. As far as right guard, the change can start at week 5, as far as I'm concerned. It's not like there's been any difference in the play for the first 3 weeks. Ingram was graded a 39 by PFF for this week. I mean, they might argue that they have chemistry, but there's way too many times where somebody is just going by him too easily and he's having big misses. That just can't happen, and it won't happen with Dalton Reisner, even if he's a little less effective in the run game. But I think their most effective runs are all going to the left side at this point. Brandel's playing great, and Christian Darrisaw, of course, is a beast in there. That would be the short-term solution. Long-term, I don't know. They've got a few things next year that they'll look to, but right now they're 3-0, so it's hard to start evaluating what offseason moves they'll make eventually. But as far as the here and now, that right guard change is getting closer and closer to happening. Let's see. Wade says, asking real questions, what distortion pedal settings best represent the crowd noise in defense last weekend? Well, if you're a guitar guy, then you know that the metal zone pedal, it sounds like a bunch of loud bees buzzing against each other. So if you were to turn down all of the mids on your amp, turn up all the lows and highs, and plug in the metal zone, it would sound like what it sounded last week. But I looked this up, 120 decibels. And remember, just funny story, the decibel meter is accurate on the big board because in one of the games where there was nothing to play for and no one was cheering, I looked up there and the meter wasn't even moving and it was at like 89. And I was like, oh, they actually use a real decibel meter. I just kind of always thought the pump the crowd noise would just keep going up because that's what it does on the video board. So I'm inclined to believe that 120 would be somewhere in there. And that's what is listed for a rock concert via Google. Because I was trying to get some sort of context. How loud was it? 120 decibels is a rock concert. 136 is what Seattle has peaked at. Well, there is your decibel reporting only here on Purple Insider. Make sure you like, subscribe, and sign up for the newsletter to get more information such as that. Is the Faithful says, unless Darnold takes them to the Super Bowl, it's an easy choice. McCarthy is the future. Let's see. Jake says, if Darnold wins a few playoff games, then I'd want the sure thing over what might happen with McCarthy. And Scott says McCarthy being better than Darnold is pure speculation. That is true. Let's see. Conrad says, any word on if Jordan Addison will be back? KOC was very positive today on Jordan Addison, and it does sound like there's a very good possibility that he will be back. Not guaranteeing anything, but sounds like there's a very decent chance. Shane says, this is what scares me. We are never terrible, but every 7 and 10 a year, there is a prop-up season that carries you to hope, only to inevitably let you down. 98, 2000, 2009, 2017. We are due. That I totally agree with. They are due for the pop-up season amidst the waves of mediocrity. That is the Vikings franchise. And I didn't think that was going to be it this year. And yet suddenly I do. And I agree with you. They were due for that pop-up season. How it ends, we never quite know. So we can't assume that it will end in catastrophe. The only thing about that, and I'm not downplaying, because this is your identity. This is the identity of Vikings fans. I did a story earlier this year where I interviewed the guy who wrote the episode of How I Met Your Mother, where every time someone talks about Gary Anderson missing the kick, he goes, damn, like that, and slaps the table. And it is very much the identity of Vikings fans of what has happened to them in the past, not having the Super Bowl, having things go wrong. And the assumption is that it will just keep happening. But that is not the only franchise. This is not the only franchise that has that or has had that identity in the past. Philadelphia didn't win a Super Bowl for a long time. New Orleans didn't win a Super Bowl for a long time. There are all sorts of franchises that until they got there, they just talked about how many calamities they had in the playoffs or how many bad seasons they had. So it's never a guarantee in the future what happened in the past. But I understand how deeply rooted that is in the entire It's like part of the ethos of being in Minnesota is to understand all the travesties that have happened in sports around the teams. And when you see a team win 3-0, or even like the Wolves last year when they beat the Nuggets and they're going to the Western Conference Finals, there's probably always in the back of your head that won't go away until someone raises the trophy that something bad could go wrong here. Jeffrey says, I think no matter what we trade Darnold, well, they probably won't be trading him. I did get a message on a sign and trade that maybe it's possible, but if you're another team, I don't know if you want to trade for that cap hit if you're doing a franchise tag or something. KOC is a quarterback whisperer, feels similar to Purdy in San Francisco, a system quarterback. McCarthy has more upside with his leadership and pocket presence. Well, we've seen great leadership and pocket presence from Sam Darnold so far. It really depends on just how the rest of this looks. Where that conversation goes is entirely dependent on how the rest of this plays out. The scrambling, the pocket presence, it's been great for Darnold. He took a couple of sacks against Houston, but he also made plays. He scrambled the last 2 weeks. And as far as leadership goes, I don't know what more you want from the way that he's operated the offense. He's not as fiery as maybe McCarthy, but he's been very good. I don't look at Purdy the same way that you do. I think that he's been much better than Jimmy Garoppolo, even though Garoppolo was pretty effective until he got hurt all the time. But they might look at it that way. It's just that Darnold is not a game managing journeyman. He is a freakishly talented journeyman. And that's the difference. Let's see. Daniel says you'd be mistaken to think that it wouldn't take a 15 to 20 a year for a dynasty. I feel like he's more about winning and playing. Plus the face of a dynasty gets paid with endorsement. Never heard Brady complain. Okay. I see what you're saying. Sam Darnold's not taking $15 million a year if he wins 12 games. Not happening. Nope. He's not taking some humongous pay cut to stay with the Vikings. He's going to go get paid what he's worth, just like Baker Mayfield did this year. The thing is, though, that if you sign a guy to a multi-year contract, you can do the cap manipulation thing with him. And also, it's not 15 or 20 a year. It'd more like be 45, 40 a year when the top guy's making 60 because it's only been 1 year. It would be almost to a T Baker Mayfield is how they would go about that if they were going to keep him. Janet says, no matter what happens, there is no way I trade JJ. O'Connell is a quarterback whisperer, have to take advantage of JJ's contract. That should still be the plan as of right now. As of this moment, it should still be the plan. But when you think about going forward and you look at the team that they have as far as free agents and who they're going to lose, it's not many guys that they're going to lose off of this team. That would be the argument for staying with Sam Darnold into the future, even in the conversation that I said we weren't going to go too far down that road, but you guys like having it. So I guess we will. But when it comes to this decision, if everybody's coming back, Grenard, Van Ginkel, if Harrison Smith plays another year, he's been great so far. Gilmore says, I want to stay and I'll take the same contract to stick around because he is in Super Bowl mode. If those things are happening, then you have to try it for another year because the team's going to stay together long term. If it ends up here's, I don't know why we haven't made this comparison at all, is that it could end up being something like what happened with Aaron Rodgers in Green Bay and Jordan Love. And if that's how it plays out, well, then that's a best case scenario that you can develop a guy over multiple seasons. And they did the thing with Rodgers where they signed him to a contract that they could manipulate to keep their Super Bowl caliber type of team together. That might be the strategy. And heck, if you end up with the problem of having to sign JJ McCarthy down the road, well, then that is under the category of good problems to have. Mike says, this is the point I was getting at. My hopes are getting higher for this year. My faith in the culture and belief that they have built within the group that they are coaching. The coaching job that we've seen, the players and the way they've brought themselves together and the chemistry that they have, the unselfishness that they have, it's really special. It's really unique, and it is special. They have so many guys with such high football character, such commitment to being great. I mean, if you're Stephon Gilmore and you're still playing at this point, the guy's made enough money. He'd be fine. He's only here because he wants the ball and he wants to play with a good team that's winning. And if you're here for that, just like Harrison Smith, the reason here Harrison Smith is here is to try to win and no other reason. He's got money. He's had many contracts. He's fine. He's here because he wants to win and play football for Brian Flores. That is a strong thing inside of a locker room when you have guys that do not need to be here and are only here because they believe they can win. I think that's part of what is pulling this culture together, as well as everybody else that is rooting for Sam Darnold. It's not just you; it's the whole locker room. Like they want this to work. They want Sam Darnold to be the story of the year, and you can really tell and you can really feel that. Let's see. Drew says Vikings have no fear of Green Bay, and so does the Packers on Minnesota. That's what makes this matchup so good. These two have played each other so many times. It's always great. And the games are always crazy and close, especially at Lambeau. It feels like they're particularly weird and they just know each other so well, but they don't know Darnold as well as they knew Kirk. And the Vikings don't know who's playing quarterback, and their running game is now a little bit different. So there's a lot of intrigue there. Oh gosh says Seattle is actually the Vikings with less good defense. I don't agree with that. I think their defense is great. Let me pull up the standings here again. How many points have they allowed? 43. So they've only allowed 43 points through the first couple weeks. I know the Vikings have 30, but I think their defense is great. Boye Mafe has been fantastic for them. The Vikings have played a little harder though, harder teams. That might be part of your evaluation there, but they're a really good defense. We're finally to the comments. This shows my negligence, and I apologize for that. That we're to the comments where you guys are reacting to Manny's predicting, and it's great. Marley says 12-5 was my absolute best case scenario. Predicted 11-6, and the 5th seed behind the 12-5 Lions. Shooter McGavin says the defense is faster without Hicks and Kendricks. I agree with you there. Let's see. Jake says in the 6 years that Kirk was here, the team never felt as good as this year's team feels. Thank God we were stuck in NFL limbo. Thank God we could be excited again. 2018 in the beginning of the season did not feel that way that you're describing in limbo. And there was a week of my life in 2019 after they beat New Orleans that I thought that they were even with San Francisco when they went there. I was incorrect. They were not even, and they got completely thwacked by San Francisco in 2019. Aside from that, was there ever a moment where you felt like the Vikings were as good as they are right now in the Kirk era? And that's not to blame Kirk. That's to say in the Kirk era, because it's a whole franchise failure. 2022, yes. When they beat Buffalo, I said, okay, they're a real contender. They just went to 8-1. That was an incredible win. And then they also got thwacked the next week as well. And hey, like we'll see what happens this time around if there's a thwacking on the way. Marley says, would you rather have from 2017 Linval, Rhodes, or all universe Harrison Smith? I would go probably Rhodes right now because I feel like the interior defensive line is doing well and Rhodes was such a game changer. But Harrison Smith should have been defensive MVP in my opinion that year. So any one of those would be great. Harrison Smith's still playing well and they've got a lot of good safety play. Probably Rhodes. If you have a guy who could shut down the top receiver from the other team, it's just, you could play defense totally different. Linval, though, the crazy thing about 17 with Linval is that he pressured the passer. That was what was crazy, is that he was getting legitimate upfield pressure. I've seen a little bit of that from Harrison Phillips, but not in the way that it happened with Linval Joseph that year. I mean, he was just absolutely phenomenal. Marley says 2017 was the last time this team felt like a true heavyweight contender and actually smoked a team 34-7 against the Bengals when Teddy made his return and McKinnon couldn't handle a 2-yard dump off. I remember McKinnon had a huge game that game. They threw screen passes and I think he had a downfield touchdown. That game was over fast. That was where the Bengals, there was a report they were going to fire Marvin Lewis, and then they didn't fire Marvin Lewis. But yes, I agree that was the last time, and a little bit in 2019 where they demolished teams and the fans were completely behind. That moment that you described where they were chanting Teddy, Teddy, that was incredible. That was incredible. And when you win like this, and they're not there yet, when you win like this, you remember these moments. Darnold coming back onto the field after getting injured and the response is the early season version of that. And all of you who like the Vikings have been pretty shortchanged on wonderful moments. 2022 had a good number of them. The biggest comeback in terms of points ever, and the whole story of Patrick Peterson saying we just need 5 touchdowns and then them doing it, that the catch from Justin Jefferson. But a lot of those other seasons just sort of go like Jordan Addison making that great play against San Francisco in 2023. That's not in the front of mind when you think about the Vikings, just because, they won 7 games. What did it all mean? But when you have great seasons, that's when you make those memories that last forever about those years and how they got there. And you could kind of already feel some of that building, and you feel a team come together, and you feel like the team likes each other and wants. We were just commenting today, the reporters, that guys are saying hi to us when we get to the locker room. Like, oh, hey guys, how you doing today? Doesn't happen when your team is 7-10. I can tell you that. And that's not a criticism of the players at all. It's just the vibe. The vibe is they're 3-0. They like each other. Oh, hey, reporters are here to write good things about us. Like everybody is in a good place. And you can feel that when you watch through TV. You can feel that in the stadium. You can feel that in the locker room. It doesn't happen every year. Most years in the NFL are roller coasters. And that feeling makes you think that it is possible that they can continue to do this, because it has a similar feeling to 2017 in terms of what's going on in the locker room. The only difference is in 17, there was angst in the locker room about the Teddy and Case and Sam Bradford situation. There was not, or there is not angst now. Because there's no question about who the quarterback is. That will be a question later on, but no questions now. There's no angst over almost anything in the locker room at this moment. There isn't some bigger storyline, and there's also not a head coach who's going to freak out if they lose this week. If they lose this week, they'll fly to London and they'll respond probably, because it's just not the same Mike Zimmer that when you go 5-0 and you lose a single game, loses his mind afterward. And in that case, also loses an offensive coordinator after that. That's not the type of stuff that happens now with Kevin O'Connell, which makes it a little bit different. Let's see. Pamela says, I think you are not taking into account the team feel. I think this is a better team than 17, not even freaking out about injuries. Yeah, the team feel is kind of what I was getting into a little bit there. And as far as better than 17, when you have the number 1 defense and a top 10 offense that year, those are very high bars to reach. And we can't quite go there after 3 weeks. I think that's my point. Is it possible? I mean, that team won 13 games and had a first round bye. They were absolutely phenomenal. Don't let the way that it ended change the way that you thought about it in the regular season. Where it was different is now we get this right away. But that year you were more skeptical early on. Remember that to go 3-2 in 2017, they had to screen pass their way to beating the Bears, just barely surviving against Mitch Trubisky in his first start in 2017. That's not what's going on here, which is them smacking people in the face to start the season. I'm not watching the Bills game, but it sounds like the Jaguars are about as low as a team could possibly be, and it might be time to move on from Doug Peterson, who was the guy that felt like saved them. That is such a tough place to be for a franchise. But I think as we look at the Vikings schedule, as we look at the AFC South and the Vikings schedule, you know this, we know this, things have to go right for you in order to win 12, 13 games. The thing that could go right for the Vikings is that all those AFC South teams just stink. And that's how it looks like it is right now. Their Indy's defense can't really stop anything, and Anthony Richardson needs development. And the Jaguars are a complete mess. They've already beaten the Texans. I mean, you're looking like very good shape from an AFC South that was supposed to be good, and it is not so good at all. Let's see. Anyone else think it was funny? Daniel says, anyone else think it was funny that Kirk's receiver threw up his hands because he got slightly tugged? Let's let a catchable pass hit the ground, not trying to catch it. Yeah, the Kyle Pitts thing, trying to draw the pass interference at the end. Those Atlanta games, you have to give them this, that when you were watching it from a Vikings perspective, those close, crazy games got frustrating and exhausting after a while. Like, again, they're playing another close game. This is not good for the nerves. When it's someone else's problem, it's just pure entertainment. I was sitting back on the couch like, oh, this is fun. Good football game. I enjoyed it. And I have to say, it is good. It is good that Kirk looked a lot better. He really, really looked much better in terms of his health over the last couple of weeks. So he'll progress, I think, from there. But still, not being able to do the QB sneak, I don't know. There's not a whole lot of mobility there. Sean says, can you imagine what happens if they keep rolling? Then you get Hawkinson, then and Addison back. We were not far from that. And even if the right guard is better, then, if they replace the right guard and it's better, then you could be talking about very much a better team. And if you develop Dallas Turner into more of a threat as we go forward, there is potential for this to get stronger as it goes, as the schedule gets weaker, which makes it look like it could be one of those seasons as we go forward. Long way to go, but that is how it looks. Wade says peak Xavier Rhodes may not have lasted long, but he was the best Vikings corner ever during that period. But my heart will always love Winfield more. Yeah, Winfield, the guy they just put into the Ring of Honor, Bobby Bryant. They've had some good ones over the years, but that 15, 16, 17, and a little 18 run for Xavier Rhodes was just phenomenal. And they have an okay group of corners without a major weakness right now. But if there's one area that could eventually get attacked, it is those corners. When teams have to play from behind, the corner's job is so much easier. Even when you look at the data from yesterday's game where you go, oh, well, they completed 70% of their passes and each corner kind of gave up a lot of completions, but it doesn't matter because it was in front of them the entire time. And when you're playing from behind, as the Texans, you're just trying to complete passes and move the ball. When they play a close game, that's when I want to see how the corners play. And when they will get truly tested is when they're playing in more of a back and forth even game than they've had to play so far. Let's see. Let me scroll. Only about halfway through the scroll. You guys have been on fire in this comment section. I really appreciate that. It's been a super fun conversation with all of you, and I appreciate the effort. Pamela says, are people really worried KOC will make a poor decision about who can play in his scheme? I assume that you mean about Darnold and JJ McCarthy. Well, you're right about Kevin O'Connell having the best potential view of these quarterbacks. There's no doubt about that. And who he's going to have is the problem is that who's best in the scheme and who's best to play right away for next year is maybe not the answer for who's best for the salary cap and who's best for the long term, which would be JJ McCarthy and taking advantage of that rookie contract. So this is a complicated, multifaceted decision that makes it hard to get through a quick discussion about it because it then becomes so complex about how are you going to continue to build on what they have as a roster. And that's why I kind of always want to pull it back to let's just see where we're going with this because we're not there yet to the point where we can still have that discussion. Dante 1984 says Keenum took us to the NFC Championship and they still moved on. Right. The difference is that Sam Darnold is actually good at, like, as far as a talent. The Case Keenum, massive respect for Case Keenum. He's 6 foot tall. and he has not a very strong arm, a lot of heart, a lot of football IQ, a lot of great leadership qualities, but he got away with a lot that season. And if they had brought him back in 2018, maybe he gets him to the playoffs with those things. I'm not sure. His throw it up in the air and see who catches it may have kept working, but got away with a lot that year and did not really have the pure throwing ability to go year after year after year as an effective quarterback. The difference with Sam Darnold is the throwing ability and the size. I mean, they both kind of have a wiggle when it comes to scrambling, but Darnold is a huge dude with a big arm that is not going to be looked at someone who's going to just regress. And Case Keenum did regress. He went to Denver, he went to Washington, he started a lot of games. It was never the same. So that's the difference to me. But you're right. No, they did go to the NFC Championship and they did move on. And that could be the case with Sam Darnold and JJ McCarthy because they do very much believe in JJ McCarthy. I think it would be more like an Aaron Rodgers and Jordan Love situation where they would kind of try to go for another year, maybe sign a 2-year contract with him that's more of a 1-year deal, but gets him more money and messes around with the salary cap. So then they could go to McCarthy after that. Let's see. Marley, franchise Sam if he makes the NFC Championship game and let McCarthy get a true year of learning experience. They could do that. If you're setting the bar at the NFC Championship game, that's a lot, but that's also not crazy. You're right. Alex Smith, they did move on and go to Colin Kaepernick and Patrick Mahomes after that. So that is fair enough as far as your reasoning, and they certainly could do that. Okay. Oh, Jaden Daniels is playing well, huh? Well, actually, I'm way behind you guys. I haven't been looking at the games at all. I haven't been looking at the scores. I have been locked into this conversation. Oh, wow. Look at that. Look at that. Jaden Daniels. Oh my gosh. 10 for 11 with 152 yards. What is happening? Cincinnati, I guess, maybe not as good as we thought. Washington, though, drafting a quarterback. This could end up being a good quarterback class. I think that after 2 weeks, people decided that it wasn't. I was snarking about this yesterday with Bo Nix because Bo Nix played well in this game, and I know you guys don't like Bo Nix very much, but we can't decide what these guys are going to be after 2 games. And Jaden Daniels, same deal. But wow, 10 for 11. Cincinnati does not look like that much of a threat. They really don't. They lost to the Patriots in week 1, bounced back, but lost to Kansas City in a game they probably shouldn't have lost. Hunter says Doug Peterson getting fired in season could be getting fired after today. Would you do that? I mean, I might. That Trevor Lawrence thing. I have not watched Trevor Lawrence a single time and thought, dude, this guy's amazing. Never. Not even, which is crazy because in college you did every time. Is it the coaching? Is it him? Is it the roster construction? There's something that doesn't quite click with Trevor Lawrence. He has this kind of conservative nature to him. He makes a lot of bad mistakes. He just doesn't look like a true franchise quarterback to me. And I'm not saying that it's not Doug Peterson's fault and maybe a better coach. Seeing a better coach in Los Angeles with the Chargers play better with Jim Harbaugh, but I don't know. After so many years, you do have to kind of wonder, is it there or is it not there? I think it's the hardest thing in sports. And Darnold is absolutely showing us this. It is the hardest thing in sports by far to figure out if a quarterback is good or not when they haven't been great. And even sometimes when they're great, they're only great for a short time, like Carson Wentz. If this was 2018 and I was saying, hey, you could draft any quarterback in the league and put him on the Vikings, you might have said Carson Wentz is like the third guy. And then immediately it's over. Trevor Lawrence, though, there's something that's not right there. And they have to keep trying coaches. They have no other option. They have to keep trying coaches. Because maybe it's like Matt Stafford, who was good, but then struggled quite a bit and then finally got in the right situation. We are in an era of football, and this might very well be because so many people actually can play quarterback that we are in an era of football where the team strength, this is why it feels like a throwback to the early 2000s. The team strength overall in coaching is just dominating because it isn't 5 quarterbacks that run the league anymore. And that's how it feels right now. So maybe Trevor Lawrence is a victim of circumstance, that they don't have a great team in Jacksonville. And when you get blown out like this on Monday Night Football, that's going to put you right on the hot seat and maybe out. That would be crazy if they fired a coach a couple weeks into the season, but they had to be skeptical going into this year about Peterson, right? He probably won't get fired right now, but in season feels almost inevitable. Drew says, how do you rate KOC, top 3 or top 5 head coach? Well, the problem is with saying top 3 is that there's coaches in this league, and I just have my standings sitting here, so that's what I'm looking at. Just it gives me all the teams to reference when we're having this discussion. There's coaches in the league that have just done a lot more winning. I mean, we can't start calling someone a top 5 head coach when they have no playoff wins. I just don't buy that. You can't do that. Sean McDermott did the crazy thing that was in the Tyler Dunn story. Tyler's going to come on the show this week, by the way, but they're about to go 3-0. That team's won their division 4 straight years, and it's about to be 5 probably this year. Put him up there. Andy Reid, Mike Tomlin is 3-0 again. You got to put him up there. John Harbaugh has a Super Bowl. You got to give it to him. But right outside of that range, that's where I would put Kevin O'Connell. I don't think you could put him above the guys who have won playoff games, above the Kyle Shanahan, above the Sean McVay. Even Dan Campbell went to the NFC Championship game last year. That is something the Vikings have not accomplished. I mean, I would rather have Kevin O'Connell than Dan Campbell, but the winning has spoken for itself there with the way they've turned around that franchise under Dan Campbell. So you can't pick them ahead of more accomplished coaches. But if you were saying for the next 5 years, draft coaches for the next 5 years, and do I get Flores as well? If I get Flores as well, then I'm picking this coaching staff very high in the discussion. Absolutely. Let's see. Marcus says, still don't like taking quarterbacks high in the first. Too many fail, let alone become franchise quarterbacks. You never get Mahomes. You never get Josh Allen. You never get CJ Stroud. You never get. It's a thing that the Vikings had to do and did the right thing in doing, in picking JJ McCarthy. And if they end up with the problem that another guy who was picked super high becomes great, well, that's fine. But it is usually, and this might change a little bit, but usually if you're trying to pick up somebody else's stuff and hope that it works out, there are way more Rick Myers than there are Sam Darnolds and Geno Smiths. Way more Christian Ponders or EJ Manuels or whatever who get second chances with other teams than there are somebody like Sam Darnold. So trying to just go out and grab whatever quarterback to put on your team and not picking one high also doesn't work. There's no pure model, but the most successful model in history of getting a quarterback is picking one high. And they made the right decision. And JJ McCarthy looked great. He really did. He looked great in his training camp. So picking one high was still the right thing to do. And Marcus follows up by saying the NFL changing run heavy, positive plays over pass heavy, home run plays. Bo Nix might become the best quarterback in that class. I'd be surprised if Bo Nix did become the best. And I do not buy what you're selling exactly when you're talking about the run heavy and positive plays over pass heavy. Pass heavy is still going to win in the league. The thing that has changed is running quarterbacks. Lamar Jackson or Jaden Daniels can throw fewer passes and they can control the football, but it's still quarterback centric. It's not running backs are running the league. It's running quarterbacks are a big factor. Josh Allen is a big factor, but whoever passes the football the best will still have the best chance to win. And that has been true forever and will always be true. And I promise as we get to the end of the season and we look up the team that was the 5 teams that were most valuable passing the football, they'll be in the playoffs. They'll be going deep in the playoffs. What's happening is an adjustment to teams trying so hard to prevent explosives. That I agree with. But offenses through history have always found answers, and I think they will. Quarterback play is a little more spread out, but it's not that you should not draft a quarterback in the first round because you should build your run game. That's not ever going to be the case. You're still looking for the 3-0 Chiefs, the 3-0 Bills behind the two best quarterbacks in the NFL. Every one of us would take those guys at any dollar figure, anytime, anywhere. And they're still going to have the highest odds to win the Super Bowl, as they usually do. So I'm not going there with you as far as drafting quarterbacks. The Vikings did the right thing in drafting JJ McCarthy. It's just that they've been very pleasantly surprised when it came to Sam Darnold so far. Blowfish says, how's Jefferson's finger? Did that cause the two uncharacteristic drops? Kevin O'Connell wasn't really buying into that when he was asked about it as far as causing the drops. But as far as we know, his finger is fine. He came in, did an x-ray, and they said he's okay. I would expect him to keep playing. It is a little slightly concerning that he's got, a thigh last week and then a hand this week, but National Football League, folks, battle of attrition, as they say. But he'll be okay, as far as I know. Derek says, let's be real. The weakness of the Vikings is depth. We have to pray for health in pretty much every position group to make a run. Well, that applies to everyone most of the time, but I actually think this is the deepest team since 2017. Because even if you go position by position, if Aaron Jones can't play for a week, Ty Chandler's been great. Nobody has great offensive line depth, but David Quessenberry is about as good of a backup left tackle and right tackle as you can find in the entire league. He was really good. He played 9 snaps yesterday. It was really good. Interior depth, they have some guys, but on the D-line, Taki Taimani has kind of emerged as somebody that they can play. I wouldn't say they have a ton of depth there. Depth in the edge rushers, a ton. Corner, it's weak. Safety, it's really good. But most position, and heck, the wide receiver position, one of the most important positions on the field, has proven to be very deep when we all thought that it was going to be a weak position for them at wide receiver in the depth. But Jalen Naylor is good. And, Brandon Powell is a ball player. He is a ball player. He just makes plays. There's a punt coming down, and the gunner is going to grab it at the 1-yard line. And Brandon Powell throws a shoulder into the guy, and it goes into the end zone. It's one of those small, just ball player plays. They have dudes at a lot of different positions. So I think even a tight end, they've shown their depth. They have the best depth that they've had in a long time. I think it's a weakness of everybody at some point. Of course, if you lose 10 players in your starting lineup, no one's good, but better than before. You can lose some people on this team, and they have, and they could still survive. That is something unique to the 2024 Vikings, and why I would say that I don't think it's going to fall off. Mike says the metal zone tone is called scooped mids. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. That's what he's referring to in simple terms is like, if you've ever heard Metallica and it sounds like chainsaws, that's what he's referring to. And that's what it sounded like. It sounded like Metallica was playing that level of sound and the buzz to it. And the way that US Bank Stadium is built and why it's not always great for concerts is because the sound seems to go up and then back down. The way that they built it, it just seems to, I don't know how this works. Okay. If you're a sound expert, you can let me know. It has waves to it. It just sounds like wave of sound. And it feels like the sound is going up and down and up and down. And if you're down on that field, it has to be insane, because even in the press box where I sit is on the 3rd level. So there's one level that's right on the field. And I was there for one game. It's like, whoa, no, that is way too loud for me. And I moved back up to the 3rd level where I'm separated a little bit and I can actually concentrate. But I still get the sense of the crowd. It was in my space where I sit, deafening. And it's rarely deafening in my spot because I'm a little separated from the crowd. I'm a little farther back. It was something. It was really something to hear the energy that Vikings fans created in that place. Has not been like that in a long time. Reconnected says, how do you know McCarthy wouldn't have even better numbers than Darnold if he didn't hurt his week 1? Well, I mean, how do we know anything? How do we know? I mean, how do we know that you can't have much better numbers than Sam Darnold? I have mentioned to you guys quite a few times how sold they were on JJ McCarthy. When Kevin O'Connell said he's our franchise quarterback, he meant it. At the same time, JJ McCarthy would have been a rookie starting instead of Darnold. It would not have looked like this. Darnold's experience is playing into his success. There will be a learning curve when it comes to McCarthy whenever he plays, in the same way that there was on Jordan Love. So if this team feels like they're on the doorstep of a Super Bowl, they would probably try to keep Sam Darnold rather than fight through the learning curve, because McCarthy, unless they think he's Mahomes and could step right in without playing it all this year, I think that they would try to stay with JJ McCarthy. But it becomes complicated. It does become complicated at this point. So I mean, that conversation is as interesting as it gets when it comes to when it comes to their future situation. David says you're wrong. Go read the article by Rob Nyer from years ago in which compares futileness to being greater than the Red Sox and Cubs. I'm not really sure what you mean as far as, like, does it impact the future or something? But the Red Sox and Cubs won World Series, so I don't know. My whole point was that what's happened in the past to the Vikings does not affect their future. And I will always believe that. There are so many teams that have tortured pasts that overcome them and end up winning Super Bowls. It has no impact. Most of these players have not been here through any of this. And a lot of the players were getting to the point that they weren't even born when Gary Anderson missed wide left. So it doesn't make any difference at all what's happened in the past. That only lives in Minnesota lore, in my opinion. And we've seen plenty of teams. Okay, they haven't won championships, but they've certainly proven that Minnesota teams are capable of getting onto the doorstep. But things go wrong for teams sometimes. And you would only feel this way. The thing about Minnesota Vikings history that I'm fascinated by. I love Minnesota Vikings history. I was just watching Ellen Page's A Football Life, which was made in 2015. So interesting. Go find it. So good. It's on YouTube. So I love the history of this team and love diving into it. But the reason that all of you have had your hearts broken so many times is how relevant the team is and how good it's been. And eventually teams that are good break through. Usually that's what makes it so difficult on all of you, but also leads you to believe that at some point that is going to happen, that they're going to break through. But it's not like it's just been so bad like the Lions year after year after year where you're just pointless and why even watch? So I think that this franchise's mentality has always been, it just takes that 1 year. It just takes that one time to get over the hump. Let's see. Mike says, can you do an episode on our position coaches? Feel like they are unsung stars right now. Well, Keenan McCardle, you know what I'll try to do at some point. Maybe I can do this. Is maybe try to get an interview with some of them for the show. I interview them regularly for articles, which you should go sign up for the newsletter if you haven't, over at purpleinsider.com. Good place to be. So I do talk to the coordinators pretty often and position coaches, but I just haven't gotten them on the show. I've had Matt Daniels a couple times, didn't quite make that work out in training camp, but Keenan McCardle is as good as it gets his job. How freaking good is Keenan McCardle at his job? Jalen Naylor, Brandon Powell. Brandon Powell wasn't even a receiver really 2 years ago. He's a punt returner and a bit player for the Rams. Now he's out there making plays. And the same thing goes. Jalen Naylor was a guy that just couldn't get on the field really, but he was identified by Keenan McCardle, I believe, is my understanding. And he's become another good wide receiver. KJ Osborne before that. I mean, it's a real edge for this team to have Keenan McCardle as their wide receiver coach. He's the one that stands out to me the most. Let's see. So, London is going to be a crazy game. Yeah, I think I agree with you on that. Derek says, we just want to be best at this ridiculous sport once at the end of the year. Too much to ask. 63 years. We should have at least one. Yes, you should. Of all the years of being close, then yes, you should. Absolutely. Blowfishes says loving McCarthy, being Darnold's biggest fan on Twitter. Yeah, I don't think that you can really quite capture, and this starts with the head coach, but it trickles down to everybody. The chemistry between these guys and the entire locker room is like that. And it speaks to Darnold, though, in my opinion, because Darnold is the veteran. He's the guy who's been around. He's the one who could have come here cynical and been like, oh, you guys all like the rookie or whatever. We never heard anything like that. He is intentionally uninteresting at the podium, and I respect that fully. Why would you want to make headlines? Why would you want to point attention at yourself if you're Sam Darnold? He was trained in the way of the New York media, but it's his approach to McCarthy, to the whole situation. The fact that McCarthy is at home watching the game, protecting his knee. I imagine he'll be back at some point, but the fact that he is cheering on Sam Darnold on Twitter, I think he doesn't have to do that. I think it just shows you the type of relationship that they built and the teammate that he wants to be to Sam Darnold. And when Darnold made a crazy throw in that one preseason game, that was all JJ McCarthy wanted to talk about. Did you guys see that throw? I mean, both of them have been very good teammates. And again, I think that comes from who they are, but also the environment that is created for those two to work together, even though you could end up with an uncomfortable situation eventually. I shot you 99. The silly thing is, if the Vikings lost to the 49ers and Texans in a close game, I think fans would feel less afraid of losing to the Packers, whereas now expectations are so high that losing now is scary. Well, the reason that losing is a little less scary is because it would make you 3-1, and 3-1 is still way better than where we thought they were going to be. It will be a tough test going to Lambeau. That defense looks really good. Their offense is playing great. It's two of the best teams in the NFL. I think if you were doing a power ranking, that you would put both teams in the top 7. The way that they've adjusted to having Malik Willis, this is one of those battles that you just dream of in the regular season. So many games in the regular season are going to be like later on this year when they go Jaguars, Titans, back-to-back weeks at Jaguars, at Titans. Like, okay, well, that's not could be fun games, but not the ones with the most juice. So I like to drink it in when we get a week like this. Like, let's talk about every position, every player, every matchup, everything we can get our hands on, because this is the type of matchup that at the beginning of the season, there's only going to be so many. You hope for those, you hope for the energy of those, and we've got it for this week. So that's cool. Daniel says McCarthy is going to be the quarterback, but I'd be okay with signing Darnold for 2 years. Give McCarthy the keys after seeing him fully healthy for a full year. Trade Darnold. Yeah, I mean, that could be the approach. Of course, they've only played 3 games, so I don't know what the approach is going to be. But if it goes that way, then that probably would be how they would handle it, or at least it would be how I would handle it. I don't know what they're talking about behind the scenes. It would be extremely difficult to move on from a quarterback that won you 12 games and got you to a position where you were walking into a playoffs feeling like you could seriously compete for a Super Bowl. If they get to that point, if that's where they end up being, then it is incredibly difficult to try to move on from that to go to a rookie unproven quarterback, because the entire locker room, fan base, plus Darnold, I mean, he's very talented. So it's not like you're saying, well, look, we got to go to the more talented guy. McCarthy is good, but is he more talented than this? Like, I don't know. But there's also a really long way to go here. And there's another scenario where this goes just okay, and they finish maybe 10-7 or 9-8, and they say we need to be better as a team, which is going to cost money. And they say, thanks for everything, Sam Darnold. They get him a huge paycheck. He goes elsewhere, and then they'll think about that decision forever. How this ends up playing out will determine the path. And I'm sure as we speak, they are in the front office, in the real front office, they are formulating these paths. So path number 1 is this scenario. Path number 2 is that scenario. Path number 3 is that scenario, with how they want to approach this. But the fact that they have someone they believe in behind Darnold makes it harder to make a bad decision, because that you have the fallback of JJ McCarthy and his talent. Landon says, with the early success this season, do you think Kwesi could make a trade before the deadline and go all in? Yeah, it's possible. I don't know that they need to do it, but cornerback is the position that I would look at for sure if they were going to do it. He could do that. I noticed that there hasn't been too many Kwesi critics in the comments so far. That's another one where, like, do I dance around the bases on that? Not yet, because they haven't won anything. It's just that throughout Kwesi Adofo-Mensah's tenure here, there has been a lot of questioning of where they were going, and that's fair. But I think that they had a plan and they stuck to it, and they're seeing the results of it. And a lot of that, of course, is based on the amount of salary cap space that they were able to create with Kwesi and Rob Brzezinski in the front office. And then what I think the best thing that Kwesi Adofo-Mensah seems to have done is just trust in his coaches when it comes to players. When Brian Flores says, I heard about this Blake Cashman dude, and I started watching his tape, and I thought he'd be perfect for us. He goes to the front office and says, I really like this Blake Cashman. I want to put him high on my free agent list, find a way to go get him. And the front office says, great, let's do it. Let's go find a way to get him. And it's not like Madden getting a guy where you just click sign player. How much money? Who cares? Signed him. Blake Cashman is signed with your team. And I know this has gotten more complicated on Madden over the years, but that's what you usually did back in my day. It's not like that. You have to negotiate with the free agent. You have to make a pitch to the free agent, and his agent has to be comfortable with what you're offering, the structure, all those things. This is conduciveness. It's the front office listening to the coaches, getting them what they need to succeed, and then seeing it come to fruition. Don't change this. Do not change this operation of how they've built the roster going forward, because this is how it needs to work. Chris says, what about head coach coordinator pairs? Combined KOC and Flores might be the best outside of Reed and Spagnuolo, unless there's a pair I'm forgetting. No, it's a good point. It's a good point that the pair is as good as it gets in the NFL. Yeah, because even in Buffalo, they have some questions about their offensive coordinator, though not tonight. Not on this night. They do not. And they're 3-0, so they shouldn't. But around the league, I mean, there are questions about teams that are strong on one side or another. So if we were just talking about, I mean, yeah, great point on Mike Tomlin. Mike Tomlin's one of the best coaches ever, but his offensive coordinator is Arthur Smith, who's maybe doing a good job this year. Still, yeah, I mean, Arthur Smith, I would take KOC way over, and Mike Tomlin and Brian Flores are probably pretty even defensively. So that's a good point. It's a good point. This is as well of a coach team as you're ever going to see in the NFL, just period. It's a great staff. Josh McCown, they have built a strong staff all the way through I mean, even special teams. The special teams is playing well. The Will Reichard, and drafting him was something that I was like, oh, they're drafting a kicker? Really? I guess. And then you see the guy kick and you go, oh, I didn't know they were drafting a freak, which they did in Will Reichard, and you guys saw it. I was actually glad. I like when things that I try to report sort of come to fruition. So when I report throughout the summer, I think there's something going on with this defense. If they can add Gilmore, they could be really good. And then they add Gilmore, and then they're good. And I go, oh, well, that's good because I said that. Like, I want my reporting to you to be accurate, right? And with Will Reichard, when he lined up for the 58-yarder, I was like, if he hits this, everyone's going to realize how freaking good this guy is at kicking. And bang, that was good from 65. There's something there. He was entertainment for everyone in training camp to see him kick the football. It's really something. I don't know how we got onto that. We got from coaching combinations to that. Matt says, can you explain the quick head movement by the center drawing a penalty? I've watched a lot of football. Never heard of that. Have you? No, I have not. I've also never seen two re-kicks. Sean Hockley must be stopped. I want them to call the rules as they're made. He was just inventing rules during that football game. If they had lost, then I would have said, what was that reffing in that game? That it sounded like someone, if you were ever in college and you were trying to kind of, not that I did this, if you were trying to kind of work your way through a class and just get a C and move on because you weren't that interested in it and you didn't really need the GPA. So, because maybe you went to community college like I did, and you're just trying to get through some of this stuff. And then there's that one kid who wants every detail. I mean, that's Sean Hockley at the referee. He was the one that studied. Teacher, you missed one little rule. You missed one little thing about this economics 102. That's Sean Hockley ref in the game. He loved himself some flag in that game. Man, he was throwing flags left and right. It was absurd. So no, to your point, no, I had not seen that happen, but the rule book is thick and he knows every single bit of it. Daniel says, believe me when I say Darnold's accuracy has been inhumane. No regard for human life with his accuracy. No catch radius needed. He's also keeping people uninjured. What I notice about Sam Darnold's accuracy is that he doesn't have to be perfect because the ball is thrown so hard. He doesn't have to lead it in front of people in the same way that other quarterbacks do. He could kind of just throw it right at them. Like Jalen Naylor just gets a little bit open and just throw it right at him. It's going so fast where Drew Brees had to throw it 15 yards out in front of him and let the guy run into it, where it seems like Darnold could throw it 5 yards out in front of him. His accuracy has been way better than I thought, though. It really is. And Justin makes this point. I agree with this. Justin says, I was expecting more like Gardner Minshew performance out of Darnold. I'm amazed and happy. I don't disagree with you. I mean, I came back from training camp, sunburned and sweaty and smelling nasty in here each night, telling you guys, again, we're trying to report things on going on camp. And I'm like, it's looking pretty good, guys. The arm is pretty good. I'm surprised that how this arm talent is crazy. But I also expected, well, he's probably going to have to game manage his way through and then hopefully hit a couple of shots. That's what they're looking for is, well, if he could just do this, then, they could run, they could play defense, they could slow the game down. That's not how they've had to play. That was not really expected for me. It was more of, hey, maybe they'll run and throw a couple of deep shots, but they've asked him to be a complete quarterback and he has. Let's see. Marcus says, did you go to Metallica US Bank recently? Missed it because I saw Red Hot Chili Peppers and was let down. It was a bad sound. I actually went to Taylor Swift last year with the wife. And, well, Ms. Swift put on a heck of a show. A lot going on with that. I mean, there's all this theater to it, which made it entertaining. It was still very echoey. It still had this, and it's meant for football. But I did read that Metallica was pretty good there. Maybe they've done some things to try to help it out. Maybe that was the case. But yes, the metal stuff, I would guess really is pretty crazy. Let's see. You guys have done an amazing job in this chat. There's so much here. And you know what I really appreciate? Just want to throw this out there for all of you listening live while I'm scrolling for more things to say, or more of your comments to read, is just how respectful you are of each other is so greatly and deeply appreciated for me, because it would be very hard for me to be blocking people and scanning through trash talking to each other and disrespect. And I mean, you guys have just done a great job here. So thank you for that. David says, you don't understand it in case you have lived here. Try being in your mid 50s. That's the point. They are in the top 5 wins of all time and everyone else has multiple Super Bowls. Well, that's the thing, David. Remember now, when I was 4.5, the Buffalo Bills lined up for a field goal to win the Super Bowl and they missed it. And then they went to 3 more Super Bowls when I was 5.5, 6.5, and 7.5, and they lost them. And then they had an amazing team in 1999. Yes, 1999. And they got a game-winning drive from their quarterback. And I was 13 years old. And the Music City Miracle happened. And the team that pulled off the Music City Miracle went to the Super Bowl, and not the Buffalo Bills, who were probably the best team. That was just my upbringing. And not only that, but in 1999, and you guys can definitely relate to this, The Dallas Stars scored a game-winning goal. Well, a gentleman's foot was in the crease. At the time, that was illegal, and yet they did not call it. And so the Sabres lost the Stanley Cup. That was my upbringing. I feel you. Then I move here, and on the first day that I arrive here, I am unpacking boxes in 2016, and I get a text from a friend that says, "What the heck just happened to Teddy Bridgewater?" I've seen it. I've been to an NFC championship where they no-show, 2017. I've seen them sign the big money quarterback and then let everybody down. I don't even know why I have these headphones on still. Starting to hurt my ears. I've been doing this for so long tonight. Great chat. So then, 2022, they win all these games. They get all this luck. They go to the playoffs and they check down on 4th and 8. I mean, I'm right there with you. I was also watching Gary Anderson that day. I remember it well. And yet, I've also seen so many other teams in all of sports come up short time after time after time and have tragic things happen to them and have their fan base feel the same way you do. Wow, we could just never get over the hump. We just always coming up short. And then at some point they don't and they win. And I think every year that you go into a season, when things like this start to happen, you're just hurting yourself by saying, what if it's Gary Anderson again? What if it's Case Keenum in the NFC Championship again? It really takes away from the fun, even if a lot of times, because 31 teams end up disappointed, you don't end up getting where you want to go. I completely get you. I really do. But I also think that that's just a hard place to live in when you're going to keep showing up every single year. It's a lot of stress to put on yourself when you want to also enjoy in the moment what's happening, enjoy the win of what's happening. And that's why I'm sort of constantly suggesting to ride the wave here. Just ride the wave. Lefty says, if Darnold gets us to a division and 10 wins, you got to extend him and be like, JJ, you're going to sit until you're 25 like Rodgers did. Yeah, it's hard to do that with the rookie quarterback contract. Rodgers came up in a bit of a different world. The Jordan Love thing isn't crazy. And at the same time, even that is a little bit of a different world with JJ McCarthy, because you're behind Sam Darnold, not Aaron Rodgers. If you're behind Aaron Rodgers, he's winning the MVP. It's a different feeling with the fact that he's winning the MVP as opposed to, well, maybe Darnold plays well enough to get him 10 wins in a division. That's just different. Like the fact that, Rodgers had won a Super Bowl. He's one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. That is just different to sit behind than it is somebody you feel like, could I be as good as him? And it becomes a little more dicey. I like this from Nick. It's Sean Hockley time. Sean Hockley. Yes, that's absolutely what it felt like for sure. So did we get a sudden head movement explanation here? Okay, so Blowfish says sudden head movement can be considered trying to draw the defense offside, can leave the offensive lineman exposed and not ready to get hit. Okay, hey, there's a rule guy right there. I had not seen it called. Your explanation is good. Your explanation is good. But Melkai, I agree that the sound at the X. Oh, yes, I agree. I saw Lady Gaga there at the X, and also Lord. It is really good there. I think I don't think I've gone to a concert at Target Center, but I liked it at Target Field. I went to see Green Day at Target Field. That was good. That was definitely good. Let's see. Nick says, look at the Red Sox history from 1919 to 03, similar to Vikings. Then look at 04 to 18. There's always hope. Yeah, that's how I look at it. That is definitely how I look at it, is that there's nothing tangible that's actually holding you back. There is no cosmic force that's saying it can't work out for you. And in this era right now, the cosmic force a lot of times was just that there were unbelievable quarterbacks who rose above everybody else. But we might see the game changing a little bit to where it's not like that in the same way as it was. We may be in a little bit more of an era of two or three quarterbacks not just dominating the entire NFL for so long. Think about the AFC, where every single year for like 20 years, it was either Roethlisberger, Brady, or Manning, and then Flacco got mixed in there. It's just not happening right now because defenses are changing and because those quarterbacks have, moved on. Let's see. Marcus says Dominic Hasek, Miroslav Shatan, of course, great players. Kelly Reed, only a Buffalo fan can relate. Yeah, that's the thing is I saw that happen, and Buffalo hasn't won a championship either. And yet I've never thought that the Sabres, because a guy's foot was in the crease, could never win. I've never thought that Josh Allen, because his kicker missed one or because his coach screwed up on 13 seconds, can never win. And there are other fan bases like the Eagles had a lot of close calls. Imagine being the Eagles. And I know you guys have no sympathy, but think about it from their franchise perspective. They had good teams way back in the day with like the Harold Carmichael era, Jaworski. They go to the 80s Super Bowl. They don't win. And then they have Donovan McNabb, 5 NFC championship games, 1 Super Bowl. They don't get there. The Eagles have always been good. And then they win it. But with who? Nick Foles, the most unlikely person to win it. This is why we watch. This is why we watch, because you just never know what in the world is going to happen. Let's see. Wayne says, lots to be encouraged about Sam's play and B-Flow's defense. I totally agree. And that's where we're at. Why don't we take a lesson? And how about this? It took me 2 hours and 40 minutes, but I got to the end of the comment section. And I tried to get as many as I could in for tonight. But I'm not going to go 3 hours every time, but this is a day to go 3 hours because it's been so long since this team has been in this spot. And this game is so big that this is a time to do it. And hopefully we'll have more opportunities to do it as well in the future. But you know what? Why don't you live where your feet are, as Kirk Cousins used to say, and as Sam Darnold has said, live where your feet are for now. This week, Vikings Packers. We'll be talking about it all week. Tons of guests coming up. You guys have requested Drew McGarry, so I'm recording with Drew McGarry tomorrow. Carmen Vitale from Fox Sports coming on the show. Tyler Dunn, who will be in Green Bay, I am told, to cover the game. So much coming up. So this was a great conversation. Greatly appreciate all of you checking in. I still got an article or two to write, so I'm going to go. But thank you all so much for such a great chat. Hopefully everything went well with this new streaming system. I feel like it must have, because nobody was giving me any indication that it wasn't. So great stuff, everybody. Thanks to Manny for coming on earlier. And we will do it again very soon. Football. Why don't I should do this at the end. Put somebody on the screen saying football. Let's leave it at that.